Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Y'all are brewheads? Yeah, we brewheads. So pour a glass of craft beer, we can do this. Yeah.
What's good, y'all? This is Cee, certified brewhead.
And I am Nathan from NathanDoesBeer.
And welcome to episode 148 of Beer and Other Shit, the podcast Adjunct series. Nathaniel, this wonderful guest we have this evening, this is a brewery that we have had on the podcast before, but we've never had the founder, a legitimate Ontario craft beer OG. This brewery is something that's very special to both of us. They were instrumental in our early days of discovering craft beer in Ontario around a decade plus. 12 for me, it was 12 years ago. I imagine about the same for you.
Yeah,
I
would certainly say so, and especially since they're from my hometown.
Yes, I was about to mention Burlington, Ontario heroes. This brewery was one of the first breweries I personally ever went to, and I don't know if John remembers. I'll tell him the story of that. He did something very kind for my friend and I back in the day in 2011, and it was this has just always been a brewery that's been super special to us. We've heard bits and pieces like from the other folks who've been on the pod, but I want to get it all from the horse's mouth as such. So, folks, please welcome Uncle John Romano of Nickel Brook in the building. Welcome, sir.
John, thanks a lot. Make me feel old.
I thought Uncle was like the youth version, the young, the cool uncle.
So it's funny. A couple of years ago, this would have been before COVID. I was at a Brewers golf tournament. And there was, a big mix of people, a lot of youngsters, and a bunch of them came up to me and asked if they could have their photo taken with me. And I was like, wow, like this, thank you. But, guys, like, I'm not a rock star. I'm not a surgeon. And they came up to me and said, you know what, I'm in craft because of what you guys do. One of my first loves was headstock, and we consider you a pioneer. And I'm like, I'm in my... Back then, it would have been in my early 50s, and I'm like going, oh, my God, are you kidding me? And just to make it clear, we're 2 decades in, guys, 2 decades in. It's crazy. It seems like yesterday. A lot's changed.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And a lot is changing. But, this industry is like an addiction, like just the people, the beer, the style, like hanging around your tap rooms and going to events and stuff. And talking to people and driving down the highway and getting waves, people, passing you on the highway, waving at you and beeping at you because they see the branded trucks. So it's a cool industry. A lot's happened, and you love it. It's not for the money. It's just the passion and the love that you have for the industry and for the liquid. Right, that's what we do.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. Speaking of the liquid, great segue. We are going to kick off with a Nickel Brook Classic this evening. If we all get this bad boy right here, we have the Naughty Neighbor American Pale Ale.
Naughty Neighbor. Everybody had one from time to time, right? So.
Did they ever? Don't we all? Loving the new branding. John, tell us about this beer, man. When did this beer first hit the market?
So this beer first came out in the market probably... over 10 years ago. Ryan Morrow, one of our first brewers, and anybody that's been in the industry for any length of time knows Ryan. I actually saw him at the OCB conference a couple of days ago. Haven't seen him in a while and talked to him. We had a good chat, reminisced for a while.
Hell yeah.
So we had to get together for a beer. He's going to come visit me in a new tap room. So Ryan created this beer, and the idea of this beer was that it is made with all American ingredients. It's an American pale ale, and Ryan came up with the name of Naughty Neighbor because looking back, things have changed. I think the way people look at Americans now. We're not going to get political here,
of course,
but Canadians are always the good boy, the nice people, the apologetic people, and the Americans were usually naughtier than we were, and we called it a naughty neighbor. So it had nothing to do with your home neighbor, your business neighbor, your work neighbor. It had to be with our neighbors to the south of Canada. That's
I actually didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
And it's we call it a pale ale, we're looking at a slightly other rebrand because people get confused with the American style pale ale. And to be honest with you, this beer is actually borderline. We've always been hop forward, less malt forward in a lot of our beers. And this beer, if when you smell it, you right away you can smell some hops, and when you taste it, you do get hops. So to me, this is more of a session IPA than it is an American Pale Ale. And I tell a lot of people that are trying to get into hoppy beers and just can't go to like a Headstock or that big of an IPA to start with something like Naughty. It's citrusy, it's fruity, it's under 5 ABV. So it's a great gateway to get to IPAs, right? So when you taste it, like if you look up, go in liquor store or beer store and you grab a couple of pale ales, they're nowhere near as bold as Naughty is, right? So
I respect that. John, pleasure to have you on, my man. Long time coming. Cheers.
cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
Hazy, we don't filter any of our beers. Again, not too malt
Delicious.
forward. We try to stay away from the malts, and we use a lot of hops that you'd see in an IPA, and it's got a nice, soft, lingering bitterness that you generally don't get from a normal pale ale, right? So to me, I hate to say this, but this has got more hops than some IPAs we have in the province, right? We've always, when people look at our recipes, they can't believe how much hop we use, and it was the original brewers that started with us were always hop forward kind of guys. They love their hops, and we always put a good dose of them in it. So this has always been, and it's one of my go-tos. It's probably what I drink the most of, right, day to day.
That would make sense. For the record, it's got Cascade, Centennial, and Citra. So it's nice and bright and tropical whilst retaining that kind of like grassy, herbal kind of bitterness in there. That's probably what I imagine the American style pale ale, but it's still got that kind of haziness. So it's like it's got a little bit more, unfiltered, more
and
tropical.
It's funny when you name some of those hops, and I'm a bit of a storyteller. So I remember back in the day we were using stuff like Nugget just because we couldn't get the Citra and the Simcoes and those style of hops, and they were all contracted out by the big brewers. And I remember getting a phone call from Yakima saying that they had a spot buy. So what happens is they fill out their contracts. When the contracts have been fulfilled, they might have 1,000 pounds left over from the contract, and they'll call people that they like in the industry, or they we pay our bills, we're nice to them on the phone. So they said, let's call the boys in Nickel Brook. We got some Citra left over from contract. So they called us, and I think at the time it was the equivalent of about 20-something thousand dollars American. My wife at the time was doing our accounting. I walked into her office and said, honey, I can do a spot buy for some hops. I really got to have these hops. They're great for IPAs and stuff. And she's like, well, we don't have the money. So walked out of her office, called, just thinking about it. I ended up calling Yakima back up, and I said, guys, you take credit cards? And they're like, yep, we do. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to do this. I'm buying the hops. We have to have them. So I put them on the credit card. They ship out. The next day, I go to get gas, and my card gets declined.
Uh-oh.
So I call my lovely wife, and I'm like, honey, are you not paying our bills? Like, I just went to go get gas, and my card got declined. Well, if you'd listened to me, like I told you, cash flow, it was all, we were growing at such a pace. Cash was a problem, because if you wouldn't have put all those hops on that credit card, I saw what you did, because, she looks at statements, she's looking at the bank account stuff. So it's all live online. Because if you wouldn't have bought those hops, you'd be fine. But buying those hops puts you over our credit limit on your card. You're lucky that even went through. So I had to pay for my gas personally, not through the company, because I bought all those hops. But that was the start of, Naughty, Neighbour, Headstock. Those hops were important to those beers, right?
That's amazing. I mean, that was a good gamble. That definitely paid off, I would say. That's awesome, man. I wanted to just rock a quick story on you, and then I want to get into your full, like, how it all came together. So I did tell you this over email, but I just wanted to say it here online. So back in 2011, long before the pod, me and my roommate Scott, who was my first co-host on here, we did our first. My girlfriend at the time, she'd gone to like Jamaica with her family, so we were like, all right, sweet, I got some time, let's do a beer trip, and we just started doing the beer selfie thing, which I mentioned earlier off air, and we like, all right, let's go to a bunch of breweries in Ontario, then we can go to like Buffalo and stuff. Like, sweet. So if I'm not mistaken, if it wasn't the first, it would have been like the second stop. I remember we went to, I think it was Trafalgar, which is in the general region.
Sure.
Yep. So we must have done there first, and then we came to Nickel Brook, and that was the original brewery. Because I know it's like only very, very recently moved within Burlington, and I distinctly remember that was when you had the gluten free, the apple pills, all those type of joints, and you were there, and you were like, "Hey guys, do you want a tour of the brewery?" And we were like, "Yes." I couldn't believe that was a thing. So you took us downstairs. It was like a downstairs part to the brewery. The dungeon, and just walked us around, and just so welcoming and kind. And we were just like, "Yo, this is like." We're nobody. We're just guys who were drinking beer, and it's 2011, and we were just happy to be there. And I think you guys even gave us a whole bunch of low fills of the gluten-free beer, which was like, obviously you can imagine back then, I lost our mind. So it was just really like special to us. We were like, just give us like 2 of everything type of thing. So it was just a really cool experience, and I imagine that's probably the type of energy that you built the business on, like being. We never felt so welcome.
Outside the box, right? Like you mentioned those 2 beers. You know, oddly enough, I can tell you stories all night long, but our brewers at the time, so one of our reps, hitting the road, one of our earliest reps, Charlotte, been with us for years. She would come by to visit me and say, "John, how come we don't make a gluten-free beer? Every time I go in the liquor store, they're sold out, and I can't believe the prices they're getting." So she asked me a couple of times. So I decided to drive down to the nearest liquor store to the brewery. Went and bought a 6-pack. I think it was $18.99. I tried it, and it was terrible. Like, it was flavorless, bodiless, aromaless. Like, it was like these poor people, right? So I went to our brewers and said, "Hey guys, I think we should make a gluten-free beer," and they wanted nothing to do with it. So me being a home brewer, I decided to make some small pilot projects of it, and it was coming out bland and flavorless, like all the rest of them at the time. So I went up to the brewers. I'm a little bit pumped, a little bit annoyed that they wouldn't help me, and I kind of had it out with them. And they're like, because I started making wine before I started making beer, and I probably have made wine from, you name a fruit, I've made wine from it. Blueberries, pineapples, apples, grapes, of course. And they're like, "Well, you need to get more body, character, and all that stuff. Well, pick a fruit, add some fruit. That's gluten-free." So I'm like, okay, well, what fruit could I use to give it some body and character, but not extensive amounts of body and character? So I ended up picking pear. We have a friend that owns a pear farm, so I've made pear. We actually put, I'll give her bottles, and we put the flower in a bottle, make a pear grow in the bottle. Then in the fall, we'll pull it off, and then I'll make wine out of the pears and then bottle it in these bottles. So we started making the gluten-free beer with pear and sorghum, and we got some body color and color and character. But I wanted to have some character, and I didn't want it just to be a blonde kind of nothing flavorless beer. So we started dosing up the hops, and we came together with the recipe. And the gluten-free beer and the apple beer, honest to God, if it wasn't for those 2 beers, I don't know if we would have made it. The gluten-free beer was on fire. It was the only Ontario-made gluten-free beer. Wow. And then the apple beer, it just, people were afraid of craft and IPAs that sector was popular, but how many people drank IPAs 20 years ago, right? And the apple beer was that anybody could drink it. Even a guy that liked beer, he could have one. And the girls liked it, and a lot of that younger demographics loved it. And we would get mocked at beer events. I remember, I'm not going to name any names, but remember going to, TFOB, back, 20 years ago, or maybe not that, but those beers were out maybe 15 years ago. but I'd go to TFOB, Toronto Festival of Beers, and they would mock me and make almost fun of me that these are brewers, right? That we were making those beers, but we were one of the first breweries to start canning and bought our own canner. They saved the brewery. And then from that, we started, okay, you know what? We're getting mocked and critiqued at these events. Brewers are not taking us serious. And we created Headstock and won a gold medal at the American Brewing Awards, many years ago. It was one of the number one IPAs in the province for years and years. And that was the start of the real craft. But we were paying the bills with those two beers, and we started having fun with barrels and cuvee and Old Kentucky and cafe and modest and stuff. So the lights are being turned on by those beers that are gone now and saved the brewery. I tell people numerous times those beers saved us. We were not doing well till we started producing those two beers.
Amazing. Maybe that's why I felt like they were
something.
Yeah, that's really cool. They were kind of fairly ubiquitous.
They were different, and we were innovative, right? We launched the first Ontario gluten-free beer. We launched that was the first fruit beer made in Ontario too, right? When I say first, I mean in retail, right? It was in the LCBO.
Yeah.
Yeah, there might have been brew pubs doing it, but not that. It was such a big beer for us. I don't know if you remember this from a couple of years ago. We actually did a collab with you. With BAOS, we brought back the green apple, and we did a green apple lager with lactose. So we switched that up a couple years ago because I pitched when Jen was the marketing manager. I was like, hey, what do you guys think about doing like a smoothie sour but green apple to do that? And they were like, that's cool. But then they're like, hey, why don't we do like a lager again, but do it a bit different, make it like a little dessert, add the lactose in there and a bit of spices and sort of like an apple pie lager, and it came out phenomenal. And it was just really cool because it was a callback to that time, and she was saying that was like the number one popular, like they did like a vote or something, and that the audience was like, bring back green apple, and the brewers weren't interested.
The one we get asked the most to bring back is the green apple Pilsner and the cucumber gose.
Oh, that's killer! Yeah, the Uber.
Yeah, the cucumber gose is one of the best summer beers in the province. It's like one of the most refreshing ones around, and the green apple one. Before, I'm thinking back to going to music festivals in Burlington in my early days of university, before I even really had a concept of what craft beer was. And it was one of those things where there was a Nickel Brook truck at the festival, and even if right, and even if you're not even if you're not much of a beer drinker, or if you are a beer drinker and don't really have an idea of what craft beer is, at that age, if you see a green apple Pilsner, that's something that that catches your eye, and if you're curious enough, you're like, I want to try that.
Like that beer was done so well. When you opened up the can, you thought your Granny's green apple came all over. Like, it was crazy. So again, storyteller, I got to tell you a little story about the cucumber gose. So Funk Lab was our one-offs, and I really didn't bug the brewers about costs and stuff. Like, it's your R&D, right? You want them to have fun. You're not making a lot of products, so you want them to play stuff. So we were at the Brewers Conference in Washington, years ago, and a couple of the brewers were with me. And every morning I'd go down to the hotel lobby and fill my water bottle with the water down there, and it usually had cucumbers in it. All of a sudden, I got addicted to cucumber fresh water in the morning. So came back from the conference, said, guys, I think I'd be cool to make a cucumber beer. And again, the brewers are like, you're crazy. It's hard to do. There's not a lot to work with. And I said, I don't care what other stuff you add to it, but I think we should make a cucumber beer and think about what other things you could put in it to give it some more flavor. So they came back to me with cucumber, lime, and salt, and I said, let's do it. So they went and bought hundreds of liters of cucumber juice, some lime juice, got some Himalayan salt, made a batch. I was so impressed. I quickly sent some samples to the liquor board. Liquor board responded right away and said, "Oh my God, this is really good stuff. I think, we would like you to make it for us." I'm like, great. So now the bills start coming in for this thing, right? And I find out we paid $10 a liter for the cucumber juice. And
Jeez.
then the lime juice was expensive. The salt was cheap. The beer was reasonable to produce. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like $10 a liter. And this thing was 30% juice, right? So when you do the math, okay, if in a liter of beer, there's $3-4 a juice. Like, how can you make any money? And then the taxes and packaging costs and all your dry goods. But I'd already, put the cart in front of the horse and sent samples in, and I didn't know what to do. So I start, thinking. I go by. At the time, my wife and I were juicing a bit. I went to the grocery store. I bought 6 cucumbers for $6, like $1 each. I juiced them all. I got 3/4 of a liter of juice and went, oh my God, I can appreciate why the cost is so expensive. Now, if I'm doing wholesale, I might get a better price, but you got labor involved, equipment. So at the time, a friend of mine still works for them, headed off one of the grocery and produce departments at Loblaws. So I called Frank up, and lives in Waterdown, not far from town. And I asked him, I said, do you know a cucumber farmer? He goes, oh my God, I know Mr. Mucci Farms. They're in Leamington. They're the biggest cucumber grower in Canada. So I called, Mr. Mucci, get him on the phone. He's like, and we start talking about it. And he goes, what do you want to do? I go, I want to make a cucumber beer. And he's like, I don't know, John, that sounds kind of silly. I don't know. It sounds actually kind of stupid. I'm like, no, it's actually very good. And he's like, well, where's your brewery? I go, in Burlington. He goes, well, I got to go to Costco in Burlington on Friday. I'm going to come see you. So he comes into the brewery, sit him down, open up a bottle, and he smells it, tastes it, and goes, wow, this is actually really nice. He goes, how many cucumbers do you need? And so I do the math. I go, about 1,000 pounds a week. And he's like, I throw that out. I'm like, pardon? He goes, I throw that out. I go, what are you talking about? They're too long. They're too short. They're crooked. We throw out so many cucumbers because the grocery stores want them to be perfect. Like I remember when I grew up on a farm. I used to pick the funniest looking cucumber and eat it, the funniest looking tomato and eat it. Now we look for perfection in all this produce, but that's not how most produce grows, right? And we came up with a deal, and he's sending me cucumbers. So I go buy a juicer. I got the cucumbers coming in. The brewers are losing their mind on me that now we have to juice. I had Pat coming up to me, our head brewer, one of our head brewers, freaking out. I had to juice. Had my CFO call me, what are you doing? We shouldn't be doing this. And I ended up getting the cucumbers for free because they were seconds. And from time to time, I'd get a small bill. We would put beer on the back of the truck. And then what would happen a lot of times would be extra produce. There'd be red peppers, tomatoes, strawberries. There was one week we got 2 pallets and we asked for 1. And I called them back up. I go, guys, what are you doing to me? Like, you sent double the amount we needed. He goes, I don't know. We had so many this week. Give them out. So people were coming in the brewery and they'd buy like a 6-pack of beer and leaving with half a dozen cucumbers. It was hilarious.
That's amazing. That's how a local economy should work.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it's done. That's fascinating, man. I want to get into your story, but I'm even thinking, I'm looking at the time. I feel like about every 25 minutes we should sort of get a new beer, and we're almost at that. So do we want to get the next beer going, and then we can get into the story? Even though it's going to be a night of stories. I love it. Tell us about the next one we're doing, my man.
So we started doing this beer a couple of years ago, for Halloween, and it's Reaper. So again, it's not a crazy, IPA. It's pretty sessionable. It's a toss between, your West Coast and your hazy. It's 5% ABV. IBUs on this beer are probably in the 50 IBU range.
50, okay.
And it's got a bit of pine, a bit of citrus, a little bit of haziness. I'm a bad door. I think they're warming up on me, sitting on my. I'm at home. I didn't want to stay at the brewery too late, so you're looking in. I'm in my kitchen. I'm a big. I love to cook and grow stuff, so I got plants. My house is
Everywhere.
full of plants.
Love it. Well, this smells great.
That's a good backdrop there.
Yeah. Really good
So
back.
like nice bitter notes, but there are lots of citrus too. This beer, like I said, is it's a toss between, West Coast meets East Coast.
Yeah, I
So
can
you've
see
got some citrus
that.
notes, but you've got some earthy pine notes at the same time, right?
Which is, like you said, Halloween. That was perfect. I mean, we're recording this November 1st, so it was Halloween last night. So it's kind of perfect time. So when did this? You said a couple years ago it came out, eh?
Yeah, I think this is the third time we've done it, and we just seem to bring it back for Halloween. It's funny, like the beer came out a couple of weeks ago, and it'll do okay because it's Halloween. But like the fall beers, like even like the pumpkin beers and stuff, they're hot and heavy up to about Halloween, and then Thanksgiving and up to Halloween, and then they die.
They just
Right?
tank
And
them.
if they don't sell out by then they're giving them away. They're discounting them. So you're safer with an IPA. So even though the theme is Halloween, if this beer goes into November, it's not a big deal and it'll sell. Definitely the number one trending and moving, beer at the brewery and in most channels is IPAs. Like it might be a small category when you look at the big, world of beer, but when it comes to craft, it's the big category, right? And
Yes.
it also falls into that, a big brewery can't make a great IPA. Like, working with these expensive hops, and then, you got to do you're doing a bittering and boiling hop, and then you're doing a secondary dry hop. And can you imagine the big guys opening up these massive tanks and throwing in, buckets upon buckets of hops to do a final dry hop? It ain't happening, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of them are done with oils and different things, and it's just not the same. So that's why a little brewery will always make a better IPA. And if you look at the comparison to Naughty, there is definitely a color. So so I've got Creeper Reaper to the right of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a little bit less malt, a little bit less color. So it's got a little bit of East Coast, West Coast happening to it.
I'd love to see it, gentlemen. Cheers.
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 So this one rocks Sabro, Citra, and Mosaic. And you can definitely get that Sabro in there, which is great. I love a bit of Sabro.
And
Yeah.
I'm finding that like Naughty Neighbor, and like this makes sense with it being around 5%. This has impressions of a session IPA as well,
Yeah.
with with kind of the more pronounced citrus notes, like a bit more pithy bitterness, and then that speaks again to the kind of east meets west vibes in there as you were describing.
So and oddly enough, it's funny what's moving. An IPA generally is around 7%. It was made to travel, and alcohol was used as a preservative. The hops are usually high in IBU, 60, 70, 80. Again, the hops acted as a preservative, made to travel, and then all of a sudden you got session IPA, and they're 4 or 5%. So what's moving the needle in that category is either your session IPA or your double and triple IPAs. So people are either looking at, what, I want to drink beer all night long. So if I have half a dozen doubles, or even look headstocks 7%, right? You have half a dozen headstocks, you're gonna know it, right? But if you
Oh yeah.
had 4, 5, 6 session IPAs, you're doing okay, right? You might wake up in the morning a little fuzzy, hazy, but you're fine, right? And then you got the doubles, which are the people going, okay, I can buy a session IPA for say $3.50 a can, or I can buy a double and triple IPA for $5 a can. But you look, bang for your buck. I just paid an extra $1.50, and I'm technically getting 2 beers. Because a double is 9%, and then a triple is 10, 11%. So it's funny how people are looking at that. And if you dive into data and stats, you'll see those are the two kind of. Regular IPAs are kind of flat, and session and doubles and triples is where there's some growth in the sector. And I don't get it. Like it's weird. So you got half the people, looking for, less calories, less filling. I want to drink a few. And then you got people going, I want to get my money's worth and I'm going to buy a double and a triple and have two beers and feel all right. It's weird times, weird times.
Yeah. It's an interesting market. I think a lot of it's coming back from COVID too. Like we always joke and say everyone came out of COVID fat and broke. So they're kind of like wanting to do a little bit of both, like, cut calories, but also like some people, I know some people who only drink the big guys like doubles and triples, and they won't even drink a single IPA. Like if it's 6%, they're like, no, it's 8+. And there's other people I know a bit more calorie conscious and, going for low ABV stuff or low cal or, so you're right. It's a very, very strange time to be in beer.
For
But this
me,
is
it's
great.
just the mood I'm in and what I'm doing. I'm at home. I just want to have a couple of beers. I'll have a double or a triple. If I'm, at a party, barbecue, going to be drinking for the afternoon, I'll drink stuff like we had Chili Tins this summer or Lost in Orbit or Naughty. I'll drink those beers because I know I'm good for at least, going to be in for about at least 6 beers or more, and I want to be functional the next day, right?
Totally. And it's great that you guys kind of cover all the bases with all this stuff, which is fantastic. Yeah. I want to pull it back to the beginning, man. Like, tell us how you first discovered craft beer and then how that journey led to opening the brewery.
So back when I was a little boy, I grew up in Bolton, Ontario, and our stomping grounds were go up Airport Road, hop over into Creemore, and then go party at Wasaga Beach. And I was one of the few of my high school friends that enjoyed Creemore. They were your typical domestic light beer guys, and I would go to Creemore. At the time, they had 500 ml bottle, and they had, I think it was you could get, I think it was an 8-pack. So I'd buy myself a couple of 8-packs. I would treat myself, drink the 8-pack, and I never had to worry about anybody drinking my beer because they all found it dark and heavy and basically say, can't believe you drink that, SHIT. Awesome. But I fell in love with it. And then I was making wine with my dad as a little boy. We were Italian. So we, grew up on a farm. My dad was a carpenter, mom was a seamstress. We on a hobby farm, and we grew lots of our vegetables, and we had fruit trees and chickens we got our eggs from and all that stuff, and started making wine and drinking wine as a little kid with soda. As I got older, it was less soda and more wine. And then my brothers, my partner Peter, we started brewing beer in our teenage years, mainly to save money, right? It wasn't really a hobby. And then you got into it, and then you found out, okay, you're trying to knock off Creemore, and so you had a few friends that didn't mind Creemore, and it's like, holy mackerel, your Creemore recipe you're making at home is better than Creemore. And then, my brother and I started Better Bitters in 1992, which was, a homebrew store. It was, again, one of the first ones. It was the craze of the U brews, but we didn't want to just be a U brew. We were, a full-blown homebrew store, and we had the U brew. So if you wanted to buy grains from us, we had grains. If you wanted to buy grape juice from us, we had grape juice. If you want to buy malt kits or winemaking kits, we had all the supplies and all that. And it grew and grew and grew and grew, and we had a great vibe. We got to know all our customers by name. Everybody had fun. There were nights we were packed. Like it got so busy you needed an appointment to get in the door. We were doing 20, 30 batches of beer a day. We were the busiest U brew in the province. We had a staff of 20.
Wow.
And this is crazy, man. We were doing malt extract brews. We were doing full mash, and there wasn't enough hours in the day to make beer sometimes. So I said to myself, okay, you know what? We need to build a little brewery where I can bang off, like, we went 10 hex, but 10 hex back then was like making 20 batches of beer. And for me to make 20 batches of full mash beer with these little, half hectoliter, mash tons and louder tons it was ridiculous. We couldn't do it in a day. So I had to start doing the math and buying grain in bulk and getting 20 batches done in a day. I thought, oh my God, our cost to produce beer is going to drop in half because of the labor and buying ingredients in bulk. I can't believe I didn't think of this earlier. So we start building the brewery, little 10 hex system, and in the midst of building the brewery, okay, who would have thunk beer wars were going to start? And you were like, when does alcohol drop in price? Look at the past 100 years, and when has wine, beer, spirits dropped in price? So here, all of a sudden, Hamilton, Ontario, good old Teresa Caccioli starts buck a beer, 24 for 24, which was just a mistake. I'll tell you a little bit about that if you want. So all of a sudden, we're building the brewery. It's open. We are continue to try and do what we do, and 24 for 24 shows up. And most people that were winemakers, it was a hobby. Their wives liked wine, or they loved wine too, and it was a hobby, and they did it with a friend. But most people that made their own beer, and I'm going back 30, 40 years ago, they did it because they were cheap. They weren't doing it because it was a hobby. It became cool and more of a hobby, I'm going to say, the past, 20 years or 25 years. It became, hey man, we should make our own beer. And guys getting together and they visit breweries, go buy some ingredients. So all of a sudden, our business disappeared. Like, all the beer brewing was gone. And we were pretty well respected in Burlington. Burlington has some of the best draft accounts, not just in the province. We have some of the best draft consuming bars. I don't know what it is. Burlington's got good consumable income. It's solid. You look at Burlington and the general population going back, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we were between, you had Ford in Oakville, Dofasco and Stelco in Hamilton. So Burlington was very solid blue collar. They worked hard for their money, but they wanted to save their money or use their money as wisely as possible. So we just, positioned the place, and we moved out here. Just luck of the draw. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, lived in Waterdown, and we chose Burlington to set up shop because we thought it was a nice, clean town. And I was getting serious with my girlfriend and thought this is where I was going to move, right? And lucked out. But the when we started the brewery, Burlington was our worst market. It might have been good for home brewing because it had solid blue collar, but they did not embrace Nickel Brook. Like, we had no taps and no business in town. My first draft account was in Guelph at the Woolwich Arms, and then right after that, I think we got the Milos. She was now he has his craft beer bar in London. God bless him. He's one of the biggest supporters of craft beer in the province. But I met Milos at the Ontario Brewing Awards. We were standing beside each other, started talking. We didn't know each other, and then traded cards. I went to go see him in London. He was the bar manager at the Marienbad, right across the street from where his present bar is. And he gave me a tap, and I was driving an old beat up pickup truck. I'll never forget this. He gave me, hey John, I'm going to take a 20 liter of organic lager, and I'm driving this beat up pickup truck for $100 beer order, spending $40-50 on fuel. Then you're out there, so you might as well call the liquor stores. And so London's been a soft spot for us, and we do fairly well out there because we were invested out there from the beginning, right? But we started as a homebrew store and then pivoted to the brewery. Didn't really know what we were doing, and we were throwing a lot of darts. We started making lagers and ales, and our original logo was just a diamond with the style of beer. And like I said, Apple and gluten free saved the brewery. And it was when we started making headstock that it was a home run. It was a good liquid. It was one of the first IPAs. It was probably the third or fourth big IPA to hit the market in the province. And that was, we never looked back after that.
When did the homebrew side officially shut down?
It probably, so it's actually going still.
Oh, right.
The Better Bitters part of it probably stopped about 10 years ago.
Okay.
One of our main suppliers was Wine Experts. They're mainly in wine supplies. So they had a program where if you switched, they were trying to create like almost like a franchise or a buying group. So it still exists. It's called Wine Experts. It's on Fairview in Burlington. We just moved it. We actually gave it to one of our staff, but we stopped doing beer probably 10 years ago or more. The wine side of it is still going. It's not, it's
Interesting.
not doing that well, but it's still, it's a one armed bandit operation now where it was 20 people, you know, 20, 30 years ago, right?
And did you? So, like, it? Are you still invested in it, or it was more like you sort
No,
of?
we actually
No.
gave it to one of our staff. He was the manager at the time, and we said, you know what, we need the space for Nickel Brook. We've outgrown this site on Drury. You can, we were trading dollars. It saved us at the beginning because Peter and I were drawing our wages from it, working in it very little, and my brother went onto Nickel Brook full time almost from the beginning, like 20 years ago, where I was running both, active in both. And then it got to the point where Nickelbrook needed me 100%. I could finally start drawing my salary from Nickelbrook, but Better Bitters paid like Nickelbrook's 20 years old. And I think I was 8 years in before I started drawing a salary from Nickelbrook. So the first eight
Wow.
years in Nickelbrook, it was being paid. I was being paid from our homebrew store. It's crazy.
Interesting. And what were the
Yeah.
different roles between you and Peter? Like, say when Nickelbrook started, were
So
you
Pete was on
brewing?
the road from the beginning. We found
Okay,
like we were making it, bottling and delivering it all, in the same
just
day.
two
And
of
then
you.
again, to tell you a story, we first couple of years in business, I'm making some deliveries to. So we launched the brewery in 2004. So next year will be 20 years. But we didn't get into the LCBO till summer of 2005.
Okay.
So, going in the LCBO, making a call, and I see a person doing a tasting. But if you look at tastings back 20, 30 years ago, it was a lot of wineries doing tastings, especially Ontario, a lot of spirit companies. You didn't see any breweries really doing the in-store tastings to the consumer. So I called the board and asked if we could do them. And they said, of course you can. It's $30. Just tell me what stores you want, and I'll tell you availability. And they're from 4 to 8 o'clock on Thursday. They're from 4 to 8 on Thursdays and Fridays, and from noon to 4 on Saturdays and Sundays. So we went to Sheridan College in Oakville. We got 4 students that were studying marketing, hired them, started booking to do tastings. And I was one Sunday morning, I'm hovering around the house doing some yard work. I get a 911 phone call from one of the students. I'm not feeling well. My grandmother's sick, and my car's giving me trouble. I really don't want to go do my tasting. And I'm like, well, okay. I'm not even smart served. And I hop in my truck. I go to the brewery, get a cooler on ice. At that time, it was green apple Pilsner in our ale in 6 packs. And I get some bits and bites, some little cups, and I head off to Oakville on Trafalgar Road and the Service Road and do the tasting. I'm there for the 4 hours. I'm having a great time and engaging with customers, the staff. I sell. They had about 46 packs in the store. I sell all 46 packs. The
Wow.
manager calls me Monday morning, goes, John, oh my God, I live in Burlington. I know who you are. I Better Bitter. I know you through Better Bitters. I used to write a wine. I used to write a home brewing, make your own beer and wine column in the local paper, the Burlington Post. And he knew who I was. He read my column. And he's like, wow, my God, you're welcome anytime. You better bring me some more beer. So we ship off some more beer. And then I look at the lineup for that particular week. And we had a tasting at 495 in Guelph Line on Stone Road. And at that time, it was rated one of the best craft beer liquor stores in the province.
Hmm.
So I decide to head out. I get my smart serve in between. I go online, gets my smart serve. They, again, they had about 40 units in the store. I bring 40 more units with me in the back of my truck. So hour and a half in, again, it's green apple pilsner and ale. This store's on fire. Everybody loves craft. They're engaged in it, interested in it. I sell all 46 packs in an hour and a half. Manager's still there. I walk into his office. His name was Jim, retired now. And I'm like, Jim, I sold all the beer in the store. I got 40, units in the back of my truck. Can I bring them in? Sure, no problem. Give me an invoice. So back then you faxed your invoice in. So fax the invoice in. And it's now about 7:30. I've sold the other 40 units. And Jim still happens to be in the store. He was working late, and he sees me packing up, and he looks at me. He goes, "John, what are you doing? Your tasting goes till 8 o'clock." I'm like, "Jim, I'm sold out. I sold all the beer." He's like, "Pardon?" I go, "You sold 86 packs of beer in under 4 hours?" He goes, "That's amazing." And he's like, "Well, thank you." And then he goes, my card at the time would just say John, right? Nickel Brook, Burlington, Ontario, John. He looks at the card and he goes, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Who are you?" I go, "Jim, what do you mean, who am I? I'm John from Nickel Brook." "No, your card doesn't tell me what position you hold in the company." And I like saying, "Oh, I'm the owner." I'd go, "Oh, the beer's named after my kids, Nick and Brooke." He's like, "Oh my God, you're the owner." So I'm driving back, again, freaking out. He says to me, "You're invited in the store anytime, blah, blah, blah." I'm driving back from Guelph. I call my brother. He's sligging kegs in downtown Toronto, at 9 o'clock at night. And I said, "Buddy, I did a tasting on Sunday, sold all the beer in the store. I did a tasting tonight. I sold all the beer in the store. You better get your butt home, get your smart serve. You and I are hitting the road." And if I told you I spent every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and most Sundays in an LCBO, my brother doing the same for multiple years, I would not be cutting myself short. And that's how it was guerrilla marketing. That's how we did it.
Interesting.
We
That's
built the
crazy.
brand doing these tastings. Then a couple of stores started getting kitchens, and Peter and I like to cook. We have records in units sold in tastings, and I still do them. Like on Friday, one of our staff couldn't do a tasting out in Waterloo, and I'm like, "I got this." I got another employee. We got another one this Friday in Guelph, again, 495. I'm going back to my
Old
first
stomping
my
grounds.
first tastings, and I'm going to be doing 495 in Guelph on Friday. One of my staff came up to me on Monday. He's like, "How's your weekend?" "Okay, I worked Friday night." So he's like, "John, you got to delegate more." And I'm like, "Why are you saying that?" And she says to me, "Well, why did you go do the tasting on Friday?" I go, "Why did I do the tasting on Friday?" I go, because I enjoy doing them. Like when I do a tasting, it's not just about selling units. I'm talking to the consumer. I'm getting feedback. What do you like about this can and the art, and what don't you like? What do you like about the liquid? And then if someone dodges me and doesn't want to buy my beer or taste my beer, so I watch the front door and I watch the cash. So if someone didn't buy my beer, didn't want to taste my beer, what did they buy? What's the most popular thing going out through the cash on a Friday night? So you get all kinds of information, and it keeps you grounded and it keeps you connected with your customer, right? With the shopper, that alcohol beverage shopper. So I'll never stop doing them. Never. I enjoy doing them, number one, and it keeps me connected to my roots, and it keeps me engaged with the consumer, and I get information from doing them. Even Peter Friday and Saturday did a tasting at LCBOs.
That's awesome, man.
We
It's
don't
like,
do them as often as we were, but we still do them. Like this summer, in the spring, I was in an LCBO every Saturday. Kind of wrecks your weekend and your summer, but I didn't do much this summer. But you know, when the brewery was, it's struggling, things are in decline. You're trying to figure things out, right? And by doing the tastings, it helps you figure things out.
Yeah. It seems like a really important thing to do for you to get like to remain sort of tapped in to what's happening. It's like whenever I worked for in the jobs I ever had, I always felt like the manager didn't really know much of what was going on the ground because they're so detached from it because they're just managing people. And now I'm a business owner and I have staff myself. I'm like, oh, I can see how it's pretty easy to stay out. So it's like you're keeping your sword sharp by being there and looking the people in the eye. And there's always been, as you probably know better than anybody, I feel like there's always like a cachet, a social cachet to always be like, oh, I was talking to the owner of the brewer. You know, people love to talk to the owner or the brewer, and it's like,
Oh, so it's funny if someone's dodging me, I pull out that card. Like I just play, hey, you want to try some beer or sampling? You know, no bad days and wicked awesome tonight, blah blah. Blah. And if they dodge me, it's like, hey, sir, I'd really like you to try my product. I'm the owner of the brewery, and you know, not all, but when a lot of people are like, no, I don't have time. I really don't want to. When you tell them you're the owner, they
changes
stop
everything.
and turn around.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And
Yeah.
I could even think if someone goes into the tap room and then they speak to you there, that's already cool. But if someone walks into an LCBO and you're taking your time out, like you said, particularly on a weekend, you're like, you own Nickel Brook. What the fuck are you doing here? Like that,
Yeah.
I think is very, like, I guess you're proving the point. I guess, you know, super meaningful to people. It's a
It's
very
even
cool
to
thing
your
to do.
staff. Like when you're this summer even one of our staff was supposed to do a tasting in Grand Bend, and their father-in-law was passing, and they were going to cancel the tasting. Because it's 3.5 hours away from the brewery. I called Dave up. He's our Windsor rep. He looks after Grand Bend. I called Dave up. I said, Dave, sorry to hear about your father-in-law. Do not cancel the tasting. I'm going to go do it. I drove, woke up bright and early, went out there early to get an idea of what's happening in Grand Bend. I couldn't believe how much it's changed and how busy it is. So we
Wow.
launched a Paloma, a cocktail, which we can talk about later. But
Yes.
I sold 20 cases of product in that store that weekend.
Jeez.
Yeah,
20 cases. See, that's amazing.
20 cases.
What? Okay, so then for people, one of our most, like, I think actually the most watched video on our channel it was called The Business of Selling Beer. And I was chatting to a sales rep in Colorado. And he was just breaking down all, the systems that he uses and what they do. So I'm curious, and I imagine that the audience might be curious too. Like, what are you doing in these sessions?
So
That's so
it
effective?
depends where I'm going. If I'm doing a consumer tasting, it's more about the passion, the love of what you do, right? And then when you go into say a bar or less restaurant, we call it on premise, you know, it's that the passion and love of what you're doing, but it's also what can I do to help this bar owner, restaurant owner? Because let's face it, like they've got 20 taps, they carry 50 beers, 50 different beers in package. So you need to observe the client, observe their clients, him as a client and an individual, what he's carrying. And it's like playing a card game. What card you have in your deck will benefit the hand, right?
Mm,
So it's being there. And then just to be honest, when people find out, that you're owner to owner, it's a totally different language, right? They're
mm.
working hard, you're working hard. And Peter and I, not so much now, but back in the day, we were our best salespeople. And when I not kidding, if I told you I was making beer, I was at the brewery grinding barley at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then coming back from London at 12 o'clock at night after making deliveries, right?
That's
And that
insane.
wasn't like every now and then. That went on for years. Even when we do our tastings, if I did a tasting in London, I'd be making beer at the crack of dawn, finishing it by early afternoon, whipping out to London, making a couple of sales calls, doing my tasting from 4 to 8, hit downtown London, make some more calls, and possibly some deliveries, and then grab the coffee and hope you didn't fall asleep on the way home.
Jeez,
You
man.
know,
And that's not a
That's
short drive either.
And I've
No.
done it to Windsor. There's days where Peter and I have done that. Like I'd be in Windsor coming back around midnight, and Peter Ottawa coming back around midnight, and we'd go home, sleep for a couple hours, and press reset.
Oh my God.
That's wild. I guess that's the unglamorous side of craft beer that most people don't
Yes, very
see or hear
sexy from
about.
the outside. Very sexy from the outside.
Oh man, that is wild. Let's take a beer. I guess it's a good time for the next one. Looking at the
do
time
it.
here.
Uncle Goose, don't you love that can?
Look at that.
I do.
So this was the winner of beer with no name.
Ah, okay.
So this is just I'm liking it. I went to visit a old friend on the weekend and brought some Uncle Goose. So most of our beers, like I talked to you said earlier, are not very malt forward. But
Right.
most West Coast IPAs, especially a lot of them made in Ontario, are very malt forward. So if you look at the color, like this is Uncle Goose. I'm going to go back to Creeper Reaper. Look at the difference in color, right?
Yeah.
So this beer is, a little bit more about the malt. So it's going to be a little sweeter. It's going to have a little bit more body. Still going to have all those nice flavors and stuff, but the malt will tone a lot of them down, right? If this beer was 5% like the other ones, the hop would come out more. Because there's beers a little bit more malt forward, it's not as bad. So it's got more body. It's more smooth because of the malts being used.
Definitely.
The orange on the can is even pretty indicative of the color of the
Yeah.
pour. It's pretty spot on, actually.
Gonna say, yeah, it's got this
And it's
beautiful
very
amber.
smooth. Like it's very smooth for 6.3%. You'd never know it, but it's got way more body than the other two, right?
Yes, I mean, definitely ramp up, and this is definitely something. Obviously, headstock we're going to do shortly, but this is. Would you say that the West Coast that's really where you made your reputation back in the day?
Yeah, and it's coming back. So for years it was West Coast, and then all of a sudden it was that hazy New England IPA, and it's crazy when we never filtered our beers,
Okay.
and it wasn't anywhere to be seen on the package. And I don't know how many times I get, John, I just cracked a keg of headstock and it's cloudy. John, I just opened up a can of headstock and it's cloudy. Like you couldn't give away a hazy beer
Back in the day,
20
right?
years ago.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, you know what saved that and allowed it to change somewhat was wheat beers. If you look back, like Ricker's White and Oak
Yeah.
Garden stuff, you go back about 16, 17 years ago, those beers were becoming very popular and they were unfiltered. So people were starting to accept that the beer was cloudy. But if you served a hazy beer like that 20 years ago, you'd get it sent back to the
Oh
brewery,
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
right?
It's
It,
yeah.
it was crazy. And we've never filtered our beers. Our beers are naturally carbonated. They're unfiltered. That's part of the process. It's part of the process that keeps it natural. Like there's some nasty stuff being used to clean filter beers, like fish finings and all kinds of stuff, right? Where
Yeah.
we use time and coldness. Like the colder the beer is and the longer it sits, the clearer it's going to get, right?
It's true. It's definitely the way to go. I'm excited to sip this because Headstock's one of my favorite beers of all time.
Beautiful
So,
color,
West
nice
is
orange
Yeah.
color.
touch opaque, beautiful. Look at that head, pillowy, right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's smooth. Like it's like I said, the team we have
Cheers,
at the
gents.
brewery right now, they're rocking it.
Nice. This is actually quite different to Headstock, which it's you would argue that most breweries don't make multiple West Coast IPAs in this day and age. So I love seeing when a brewery does, and to see where they go with it. This is very different. This is I guess we'll find out soon. It's a lot sweeter. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
It's sweeter
More
because
tropical.
you can
Tropical.
the malt, right?
Yeah.
So you got it right. So the amount of malt in this beer, it's got way more malt and richer malt. So this beer is much more malt forward, right?
Okay.
And headstock's more, less malt, and it's more the traditional where it's got like a piney bitterness,
Mm-hmm.
where this has malt forward, a little bit of pine, a little bit of citrus.
Mm. But it's a lot more. You could argue that the headstock is a little more like that West Coast kind of like older school, like punchier as
Well, that's
far
what
as.
Yeah.
it's pretty West Coast piney. Like when we launched Headstock back in the day, we bittered and dry hopped with Nugget because that's all we could get and all we could afford
Right.
at the time, right?
Good old
But
nugget.
it
What's in this one?
worked.
What's in this?
This has got Amarillo, Citra, Simcoe.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that. It's like a little bit dank from that Simcoe in there. Yeah, man, this is great. This works really well. That nice malt presence is kind of like thick and creamy, but the piney dankness is like an undertone as opposed to sort of overwhelming. And I feel like whilst maybe the three of us are very much into, all things Westies, there's a whole bunch of people, kind of what you were saying as well, when New England's kind of took over. There's a whole group. Someone told me this recently. They were like, there's a whole group of people who think an IPA is a New England IPA, and that a sour is a smoothie sour, and a stout is a pastry stout. Like they don't know that these things really exist. That's how they came into beer. So
Yeah.
this is probably, and then they drink a West Coast IPA, like, oh, what the fuck is this? This is like bitter and like it's a pine and trees, like. But then a beer like this could kind of warm people up to it potentially. Is that fair?
This is almost like a gateway to a true West Coast, right?
Yeah, Gateway West Coast. Okay, that was a question for you. We often talk about gateway stuff here because I always feel like it's the most underappreciated thing that breweries do. Gateway anything is incredible for craft beer because if we have to make sure we have more people drinking craft beer or it's not going to be here much longer. So gateway is a way to bring people in, and there isn't like one specific style or anything that is gateway, but I feel like with you guys have in an interesting position where you're able to satisfy the beer nerds with beers like Headstock, which is still a classic to this day, with Kentucky Bastard, which is one of the best Imperial Stout series in the province, hands down. It's spectacular. And then you're doing some of the new, like that's the nerdy stuff, and then the newer stuff you've got like a ton of different beers that are, well, you could argue Naughty Neighbor's a bit of a gateway. There's a bunch of others. Like, did you guys go into the game anticipating that was that the plan to be a brewery that?
Well, so what happened? So you got Headstock, it's performing.
Mm-hmm.
You got that demographics. You got those IPA fans, and now the brand grows, and then it hits a peak, it plateaus, and it's like, okay, if I hand Headstock to a domestic beer drinker, they're gonna spit it out.
Yeah.
It's true.
90% chance, right? But now if I, start talking to, a domestic beer drinker and say, have you ever had an IPA? Oh, they're strong, they're too bitter. And I hand them a Lost in Orbit or a Naughty Neighbor, he might say, oh, it's okay. Like he'll finish the beer. He may not really, really like it, but he'll finish it. But then it's like I get very annoyed at people that say, I only drink this beer. I only drink that beer. It's like saying I only eat pizza. I only eat hamburgers, right?
Yeah.
So I get annoyed, and I have friends that are big fans, and I have friends that they drive me crazy. And it's like anything, like giving it a chance. If you drank a Naughty Neighbor every night, okay, your palate's, and you stop drinking that other stuff, and you have a Naughty Neighbor every night, your palate will adjust to that, and that's going to become your neutral point. But you got to clear your mind, and you got to give it a chance. Like my wife and I. No, I'm not a big golfer. I golfed for the first time this year a couple of weeks ago. I went to a golf tournament. And of course, I bring a mix. I bring no bad days and stuff. But there's a few people in the basement. We, all went had dinner at home after it. And there's, a handful of people that only drink this beer, only drink that beer. And of course I brought, a little bit of Naughty, a little bit of, Uncle Goose, and a case of No Bad Days, because I knew that majority of the people coming to this thing were going to be those people. And they're all drinking their stuff. But then I start putting cans of No Bad Days out. And even our No Bad Days was a plain lager. It's 100% malt. It's got some hop. And people don't realize that most domestic beer is is made with corn extract and fillers and stuff. And that's why it's so blonde and so flavorless. Because if the beer is made with 100% malted barley, you're going to get some body and flavor. And, it's a pretty neutral beer, and it's pretty clean. And, one guy's trying, the second one guy's trying is like, wow, this is okay. But they've got this craft beer. Nickel Brook makes IPAs and stuff. I converted a couple of people that night, but, if I wouldn't have pushed, and it would never have happened. And it gets tiring. I hate to say, like, I'm in it 20 years into it, and I still have good friends and acquaintances and stuff that won't touch our beer. But it's almost like it's a mental thing. They're trapped and set in their ways, and they just won't give the beer a chance. Like my main drinks are beer, wine, and if I'm not drinking alcohol, I like kombucha. Okay?
Yeah, hell yeah.
If I'm not drinking alcohol, I have a kombucha at night. It's my little treat. I have one bottle. I fell in love with GT's
Yes.
ginger kombucha. Had that bite, low in sugar, and it was that, you go to the grocery store, it's almost $4 a bottle. And at one time, Costco had it. It worked out to $3 a bottle. So I was buying it there, and then they stopped carrying it. And Costco had their own brand. So of course, I know what they did. They got people hooked on kombucha. It was, they launched their own at a cheaper price. So I grab a case of it. It comes in an 8-pack for $2 less than what a 6-pack of GT was. And I buy it. I bring it home. I open up a bottle going, oh man, I don't know. It's okay, but
Not the same.
I don't know. So 8 bottles later, I'm like, it's okay. And then I'm like, I go back to GT, and then it starts hitting $4 a bottle and stuff. And I go back to Costco. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try it one more time. I get the other one. By the time I finished the second box, I was a convert. That's what I buy now. My flavor adjusted it. Yeah, GT's has a little bit more ginger bite, but the Costco one's okay. They make a ginger one as well. And I'm a convert because I acquired a taste for it, right? Like, you don't like garlic? Well, don't use a lot of it. Like, if I showed you the amount of garlic, I grow my own, first of all, 600 bulbs, believe it.
Jeez.
And, people watch me cooking, and they're like, oh my God. And then the first time they have my tomato sauce, they're burping garlic all night, right? But the second and third time they have it, they're like addicted to it, because the base of my sauce is homemade tomatoes, lots of onion, and lots of garlic. And then once you try it a couple of times, you're hooked, and anything else is flavorless after that. Like even Guinness, people like, oh my God, Guinness tastes like nothing to me.
Nothing. It tastes like nothing.
It's incredibly mild.
Yeah, like it's scarily so. It's you're drinking this dark thing and I'm ready for this punch, even at like 4%, and it's just if you did, it could have just been creamy water at some point.
Yes, but it's scary. It's a mindset. People get programmed, right? They're scared of that beer. Like it's like I've been told, the stuff from back home is way better, and probably is. Like, let's face it, this is reconstituted in North America with some nitrogen, right? And people are afraid of it, right? And and it's like, Ricker's Red is the worst thing. Like, you got this dark black beer, and it's also flavorless, but it's this big black bold thing, right? It was a mistake. It's colored ale from the big guys, right?
Yeah, it's totally different. I see what you're saying. It's just more like that. Once you actually try stuff and just sort of be a little bit more adventurous and give it more than one chance, then you get it, because it does take time to adjust.
like ginger's good for you. So if you wanted to make a heavy dosey ginger drink, it's gonna have a lot of heat, and
Yep.
it's gonna bother you. But like I drink lemon ginger water when I wake up in the morning. I make myself a tea, lemon and ginger water.
I do
Start
that
my
every
day.
day. Yep. And cayenne pepper too.
I can
Make,
sometimes I add the cayenne,
yeah.
and I add more and more ginger, and sometimes I let it steep for like hours. And if I drink it like within 10 minutes, it's got a soft ginger note. If I let it stay for a couple hours, it's hot, right?
Mm,
But then you get accustomed to that, and then you're like, you know what? I prefer that punch,
that
but you
punch.
can't start off drinking that way, and it's good for you, right? So the more ginger you extract out of when making the tea, the better it is for you, right?
Mm. Yep. My mother-in-law put me onto that, and it's the best thing. I start every day with it. It gets the mucus flowing. It gets all the crap out of you, so you start the day.
Cleanses you, right?
It's I love it. It's one of my favorite things, and like you don't always like enjoy it. It's not the tastiest thing, but sometimes you could add like a spoon. I had like half a teaspoon of Manuka honeys because it's got bioactive ingredients or something in it. So it's like if I'm feeling like I'm not really, you can just soften it, but you don't need it. And it's
Look
like
at you, you healthy dude, you.
I got to balance all this beer, brother. You're I got to get on your level with the garlic though.
I'm a good boy about 5 days a week, and I'm a bad boy about 2 days a week. So what are you gonna do?
Hey man, you got to balance the good and bad boys. I'm all for it. It's the balance is definitely true. But yeah, you're right, man. It's such an interesting thing I guess that's the biggest hump in beer is getting people to sort of like get over their preconceptions and just give something a try and experiment and have fun like you would with food. What are you going to do? Go somewhere and not try all the food? You're going to eat
I love
McDonald's when you
trying
go to
different
Europe?
stuff,
It's
right?
the best.
I love to cook, and I experiment when I go out. Some of my family's best dishes I prepare at home now. Some are my traditional mom and grandmother's recipes and stuff. But like my wife's favorite pasta dish is a chicken bow tie, and we were out in La Costa, a little Italian restaurant downtown Burlington, like 18, 19 years ago. I think it just opened Nickel Brook. I was trying to make a sales call and treat my wife all in the same time. And she buys
Good
this
man.
chicken bow tie pasta, and she's raving about it. I have a bite of it. The waiter comes back. I ask him a few questions. He whips over into the kitchen, asks the chef my questions, comes back with the answers. The next Saturday, we're quiet home at night watching a movie. I cook on the weekends a lot, and I made the dish. And she sits down and starts eating. And goes, oh my god, this is the pasta I had last Saturday, but it's even better because I put more cheese in it, I put more
Mm.
chicken in it, I put more sun dried tomatoes in it, and she raves about it. And it's one of my family's favorite dishes. And my brother and I, believe it or not, we make our staff the Christmas, like we have our Christmas party. It's all homemade. My brother and I take like almost 2 days off work, pizza, pasta, smoked meat,
Ooh.
and I make that pasta for the staff at Christmas, and they like goo goo gaga. Some of them bring doggy, like they bring takeaway containers because we make so much of it, right? So John, I brought my takeaway container. I'm like, no problem, Scott. Fill it
I'll have
up,
to.
buddy.
I'm gonna have to swing by, Johnny, because
Yeah, yeah.
I used to work at Jack Astor's like 20 years ago, and there was a dish on their menu, and I think it was called Asiago chicken bow ties, and it
Yeah.
sounds exactly like what you're talking about, but what you're talking about sounds
You
even
could
better.
do with Asiago too, yeah. It's
Okay,
made
so it's
with
just
cream, and so it's almost a rosé with sun-dried
oh,
tomatoes, fresh tomato, cream, of course, chicken, and I marinate the chicken overnight in wine, basil, thyme, oregano,
jeez,
garlic, and then I fry it up in wine and get it all cooked off, and then the
God
the
damn.
base the
I'm
base
hungry.
is cream, of course, not good for your whipping cream. Your grated. I use big fan of Romano and
Of course you are.
Parmigiano, but I use the two mixes and then sun dried tomatoes, and then I garnish the top with fresh chopped tomatoes. some garlic bread, and Bob's your uncle.
Italians know how to do it, man.
Oh,
It's
buddy, just came back from Italy, my 30th anniversary. Went there for my wedding and our honeymoon. Never went back for 30 years. I got back and I went to my mom. My dad passed away recently. My mom's alone, but went to go see her. I'm like, Mom, what the hell? Why did you come to Canada?
this
What do
is
you mean?
incredible.
Oh my God! Like, there's no Italians immigrating to Canada anymore, right? That was 70 years ago.
Right.
And like they live better, they eat better, the quality of life, the quality of the food. My wife eats very little pasta and pizza here because her body just doesn't function as well every day there because the food's not processed like it is here, right?
Mm.
And she's like, my grandparents were farmers in Italy, grapes, olives, almonds, and back then farmers had kids to work the farm. You didn't have a kid to send them to university. You had a kid to work the farm. So the
Mm.
first three kids were for girls. So my grandfather's like, I can't do this farming by myself. I've had three girls. I'm getting older. He's had some cousins and stuff come to Toronto. He decides to follow them, gets here and has four boys. So my mom said to me, if we would have had the four boys first, you'd be living in Italy.
I mean, that makes sense. Have you used any of your Italian, with the heritage in any way, and injected that into the business? Has it been influenced by that?
I think more I think the family culture. Like,
Okay.
don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect, but we try and have I try to. It gets busy and you get caught up in the weeds and then the ruts and all that stuff. But Italians are strong family oriented people, and I think Peter and I work hard to do that. They joke around with me. A lot of people go, have you tried making a garlic beer or an oregano beer? Though, so the closest, I have a big mint patch at home. I live in the country. I have a big property and I do a lot of gardening. It's my yoga,
Oh
and
yeah.
I get a kick out of getting a tomato seed and then doing the seedling in the my living room turns into a greenhouse in the late winter and spring. My wife thinks I'm crazy, and then taking this out in the garden and planting it, and then by midsummer you're pulling baskets daily out of your garden. I'm going to plant this weekend 600 garlic bulbs, right? And
Jeez.
it's a big joke. I give out beer and garlic when I'm doing sales calls and stuff. Sometimes it's pretty funny.
That's awesome. That's so Italian. I love it. I feel like all Italians, I've known people who you go in their garage and they got like meat curing, like, hanging from the ceiling, and then they,
That was my family
yeah,
home.
I love that. And they do the tomato sauce making thing like once a year or whatever. You have this big thing and
Every
everyone,
year,
yeah,
28 bushels, because I got all my buddies love my spaghetti sauce, right? So you give them your recipe, you're like, you're keeping something from me. My sauce doesn't taste anything like yours. I'm like, okay, where'd you get the garlic? You bought that Chinese junk. Where'd you
yeah,
get the tomatoes? You use that friggin', Heinz can. I make my own sauce. I grow my own garlic. I grow my own basil. It's night and day. It's night
yeah,
and day,
yeah.
right?
Do you think
It's
it
like
makes it?
craft beer. I
Yeah,
make
I was about
craft
to say,
spaghetti sauce.
yeah. Have you ever thought have you ever thought about selling it through the business, or it's not really that kind of part of
That's
you?
a lot of work, and that's another animal, right? Like, and oddly enough, and even at the Brewers Conference, like, our old town, talking about the move. So we were at Drury Lane for 30 years. We get pushed out because of high density, losing my mind, trying to find the right space, can't find space that has parking. Fast forward 2 years later, finally find a place that has, everything we need, checks all the boxes, but you have anxiety. Like you were at that space for 30 years. Like I could almost autopilot drive from my house to Drury Lane. And when we
Mm.
moved to Mainway, many times I drove down the Drury Lane because I was so it was like a program,
Yeah,
down, left,
Yeah,
at work,
just
right?
all muscle memory at that point.
Yeah, at 30 years going to the same place.
yeah. That's
Hello,
crazy.
like it's crazy, right? And then you move there, and it's a bigger space. You guys got to come out. It's a bigger space. It's
Yeah,
more vibrant. It's open, and you know, our old place, it was a tap room. You went to buy beer and really sample beer, and then you start doing by the glass. But what's happened now is survival now, part of it, and heard the LCBO say this, some major brands say this, and then this week, last week, Trillium Brewery was at OCB, and the husband and wife talked. They're a Boston craft brewery that's done amazing. We're a brewery, but at the end of the day, we're in the hospitality business, right? Making beer and selling it out of your tap room is hospitality, and it's about creating an experience. Okay, and what better experience is having food with a good beer, right? Good beer, good food. So you know, we
Yeah.
started, you know, at Drury Lane with chips, right, and peanuts. And then we moved to Mainway, and it's chips and peanuts. And then all of a sudden, like, you start to do things. And we sponsored a Ukrainian family this past summer, and mother daughter. The daughter started working us full time. The mom worked at the Pepperwood local restaurant part time. So we asked her. She's very baker, very good in the kitchen. We asked her if she could make us a authentic Ukrainian lunch for our sales meeting. We were having all our reps coming in from all over the province and stuff. So she made this fried, like almost panzerotti. It was like a big pierogi, but fried. And then she made 4 different pierogies. One blew my mind more than the other one. And then she did a couple of salads. Well, I fell in love with them. I said, Larissa, would you mind working for us on the weekend and doing pierogies? So we're doing handmade, fresh, daily, in the back pierogies on the weekend. And now we've added pizza. And then all of a sudden the room's getting busier. People want to have parties in the room, and we need more help. And I put some feelers out, call a old friend that used to own a bar in town. And when COVID hit, she said, I'm out of here. She sells her position in it. I called her up and offer her a job. She comes in and checks the place out and says, you know what, I think I can handle this. And now Kelly's doing a great job, and we're starting to add quesadillas and nachos and pizza and now pierogies. So we're going that direction because it's about someone. It's not just about selling a case of beer. They can listen to someone playing guitar and singing, and then having the best pierogies they ever had in their life and blow their brains out. This is so good. And then all of a sudden they have, you know, Uncle Goose. So it's just creating, you know, that hospitality, and it's all about good times, good beer, good food. And now you create an experience. And then what are they going to do? They're going to tell people about it. There's an activity plex next door to the new brewery, in our new location in Burlington, and it's a kids zone place. Like, they got swimming and aquatots and fitness and stuff. And I remember the first couple of weeks we were open, I'm in my office, tap room is beside the offices, and I hear all this laughing and screaming. I walk into the tap room, there's 20 strollers in the new tap room. Like, going, what the heck? All the mamas next door come over after the aquatots or fitness little, because it's like mom does a class with the, you know, the kid is like, I forgot what they call it, but I think it's fitness tots or something. And they're having a good time. They're having a beer. They're sharing a pizza. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. I don't know if you guys know that this brewery's named after 2 kids. Nick was 7 when he started making beer. Now he's 27. And, you know, and then they love the vibe. They love the atmosphere. The food's decent. And then, you know, you go back in the tap room on Saturday afternoon and you notice a couple of the moms. And like, wow, you guys are regulars. Like, saw you on Tuesday, you're back on Saturday. Talk to me. Like, I need some information here. What's bringing you back? They're like, John, this is a cool place. You know, you make good beer. You got decent food. And I wanted to bring my husband. I wanted him to experience what we experienced on Tuesday. I'm like, God bless, man. God bless. And these girls have become like regular customers of ours. Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing.
That's fantastic.
That's super positive with the new spot. I think I'm looking at the time here. Do you want to do the next one?
Yeah, we got a boogie, man. We got to do some headstock.
Yeah, the classic, the legend.
the one that's paying the bills now. So year after year after year, you know, you launch a new beer, you know, it's got some momentum, and you know, it peaks out and then it fizzles out, and then it, you know, you do the next one off or next seasonal beer. But headstock, at the end of the day, you know, you look back the past, you know, 10, 12 years, it's been our staple, our number one beer.
Delicious.
So I got to tell you the story how this one started.
Please.
Going back to, you know, when I talked to you about the gluten-free beer and the apple beer, the brewers were getting mentally beat up, you know, going to events and talking to their you know, people in the industry and their brewing partners and stuff. And they were same thing. They were getting a bit mocked and critiqued. So the staff came up to me, and the brewing staff came up to me and said, "John, we got to make an IPA." I said, "Guys, yeah, let's do an IPA. Like, we're in a happy place now." So I said to them, you know, a lot of them were shopping in the States, going to Buffalo, consumer beverages, different places, buying beer. And I said, next week or so, I need you guys to do some research, do some traveling, and go out and buy your favorite IPAs. So we had IPAs from upper state. Yeah, I think Etika Brewing Company. That's was one of the first breweries I tried. Citra. You know, they
Okay.
went and got all these IPAs and stuff, and we sat down at a table, and with two of our brewers, and I sat down at the table and I go, okay, I like the bouquets coming out of this one. I love the malt, you know, base out of this one, and I love the hop profile in this one. So they took the 3, 4 beers that I liked, and they put together a recipe, and headstock was created. One of our brewers was going to the American Brewing Awards, and he said, "John, there's still time to enter. Do you mind if I enter headstock?" No problem. So he enters headstock. He calls me Sunday morning, freaking out that the headstock won a gold medal at the Brewing Awards.
Wow.
And
Damn.
at the time, we didn't have a name for it, but you know, you being from Burlington, I'll remember that we did Sound of Music for years, which is one of the biggest. It's the largest free music festival in North America. Like, it's not
Yep.
paid, the main festival, right? So we were doing a lot of festivals, rib fest and stuff, and you know, what more than good beer and good music, right? They go hand in hand, and we just, you know, saw a lot of that beer being, you know, consumed at a festival, and we were doing a lot of festivals, so we named the beer Headstock.
Love it. Love to see
Cheers.
There
it.
you go.
Gentlemen, cheers. Classic.
And this
Cheers.
is more that classic, you know, full body,
Yeah.
piney,
Hmm.
Yeah.
bitter, you know,
That
West
punch.
Coast IPA, right?
Definitely.
Yep.
I actually remember when I went to the brewery that time in 2011, I got headstock when it was in bottles. And I remember getting 2 different bottles, and I think one of them had. Did you say it was called Sound of Music, a festival?
Yes. So we did a lager. We tried to do, you know, we tried to have several brands of headstock. We were
Okay.
doing a lager. We were doing a red. We thought we would be able to brand multiple different styles of beer with the one brand for festivals, but it backfired on us. Backfired.
Okay. I guess because people got confused because of the
Yeah, we're
consumer.
too small of a brewery. So look at the color difference between Uncle Goose and Headstock.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's
a
a
lot
lot
lighter.
more malt in Uncle Goose and much more orange.
Yeah. I feel like you can't see it as well on the camera, but I'm looking at it in real life and it's significantly different. It's a lot more paler, like a more straw kind of color.
It's not as sweet, right?
No, not as sweet. Definitely a
We'll
little.
ferment out Headstock a little further,
Mhm.
and where Uncle Goose probably has a little bit more residual sugar.
It's delicious. God, this beer has got to be one of the best beers that's held up in Ontario. Like, I feel like Nate and I did a West Coast IPA episode, just drinking West Coast from Ontario and Quebec, and the 2 that we did from Ontario was Headstock and Lone Pine, and it's just it's like this beer is so damn good, and it's year round. Like, it's so crazy that there's a beer this good that's just year round, and you can just pick it up at the LCBO for a few bucks. It's just crazy.
I'm a big fan
Yeah,
of Lone
and
Pine too. If I'm out, I definitely fan of Sawdust and Sam, and we used to do 11:05 because Ryan and Sam had the same birthday.
Yep.
we have a soft spot for those boys. They're good boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool that it's you two because Sam's a friend of ours as well and such a champion, and you guys just having those two beers like that are just so exceptional, and they're both year round and they're both easy to get, and it's just kind of crazy sometimes when you really think about it, like to get good beer,
So accessible.
so accessible. There's some great beers at
Like
the
those-
So
LCBO,
we're going to be
but-
putting, we're going to be focusing, like we find that, new is always sexy. And we're like, guys, headstock pays the bills.
yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
cool to do Creeper Reaper and Uncle Goose and all this stuff. But we feel that headstock's that proven beer. It's lived the test of time. And it's in about half of the LCBOs in Ontario.
Mhm.
And we're going to be putting a push and focusing on that brand in the next coming months and into 2024. But our goal is to have headstock in virtually every liquor store in the province.
I'd love to see that. I just had a thought while you were saying that. I was in Florida for a month in April, and two things that I bought reminded me of this. I bought a 6-pack in short cans of Bell's Two Hearted, and also a 6-pack in short cans of Cigar City's High Lie, which are both classic, been around for 10, 20 years, West Coast IPAs, and I loved it. I loved having them in a 6-pack. I loved having them in a short can, and this very much reminds me of that. It's about the same ABV as well. Have you ever considered, maybe because this is kind of like a flagship beer that's legendary and that, like you said, keeps the lights on, like doing something like that, chucking it in short cans, throwing it in like a multi-pack or anything
So
like that?
the issue in Ontario is that, the liquor board is the driving force.
Okay.
And they
love
it's
tall
about
boys.
tall boys, and it's also that margin. Like if I told you, how much, there's $1 plus in taxes in a tall boy can, right?
I heard.
So every time that can's flipped, the government and the liquor board are making $1 plus, and they've driven that channel. So if you look at short cans in the province, and like you look at cans only got popular in the US 5, 6, 7 years ago, where you look at cans got we were one of the first breweries in the province to buy a canner. And I think we bought our bottling line in 2005, and we bought our canning line in 2006, right? So like 18 years ago or 17 years ago, we started selling in the States, years ago. They didn't want our tall boys. We had Naughty and Headstock in a bottle because the States wanted it. They didn't even look at, and they were adamant that cans were never going to be popular. And then it shifted there too, because people that drink craft beer, it's changing a little bit now, but it's changing because of price point. If you buy, we talked about this earlier, if you buy a can of headstock, it's $3.75. If you buy a case of headstock, it's $3. If you buy a 6-pack of headstock, because I reduced the price as you increase the volume. So single can's $3.75. If you buy 6, you're probably paying $3.40. If you buy 12, you're probably paying $3.20. And if you buy 24, you're paying $3. So you're buying it because convenience, you want 6, they're short. But in Ontario, what's driving the pack size right now is that, it's sign of the times. Everybody's dollar's got to be spread out a little further. And if they're a big fan of headstock and can, buy a case of it for $3, so pack sizing is driving it. And I bet you the LCBO, I'm hoping with, the beer stores agreement coming to renewal in 2025, that, they had a behind the door agreement that the liquor store could not sell 12s and 24s. I'm hoping that changes and that you'll be able to go to the liquor store and they'll have the price for single, 6, 12, and 24, and you can make that decision there. They'll have to carry more product, and that'll make a big difference. I have no idea why that was done, and I think there was some greasing going on and some backdoor conversations, and how that formulated is beyond anybody's idea.
Yeah,
And hopefully that changes, right? I don't think the beer store should leave, but I think some stuff needs to change, definitely.
for sure. I remember
Yeah.
I remember getting recently. I think my girlfriend was buying like a like the neutral vodka soda or whatever, like, and they
Yeah.
had them in 12 packs at the
Yeah.
LCBO.
So again, what was happening when the seltzers first came out, and that's what's affecting the beer industry. We talked about this earlier before when we
Mm,
went live. You know, the legalizing of marijuana and seltzers. Like if you would have told me 5 years ago that flavored water was gonna change the beer world, I would have thought you were crazy. And a lot of it is that's what it is. It's badly flavored water with God knows if there's even vodka in them, right? And people are more health conscious as their carbs, their sugar content, their intake, and all this other stuff. And between inflation, marijuana, cost of living, and all that stuff, it's affecting the beer industry, right?
yeah,
Things are changing. Like the first year of COVID, it was like Christmas for a full year, and then the second year of COVID, it was like, oh my God, I drank too much that first year. I got to start making some cutbacks, and beer is one of the ones that got hit. But
yeah.
honest to God, like it's changed the world. We're making a cocktail now. Not that I wanted to, but when that trend, even non-alc, like the growth in that sector, there's a call right now. The
Massive.
LCBO wants to carry more non-alcoholic beer, right? And to make a good one, you make
It's
beer
difficult.
and then you
Yeah,
remove the alcohol, right? So it's actually more costly to make than regular beer. Where, hate to say it, the cheap stuff is flavored water. The good stuff, like the
Hmm.
older, like now you can buy yeast that eat alcohol and stuff, but the good stuff that was made, like the Bexes and non-hop Bexes and all that, they made beer and they spun the alcohol out of the beer and left the bitterness and the flavors that were there. And that's why it was just as expensive as an alcoholic beer, right? But it's a huge
yeah,
trend, right? So if you would have told me, like even flavored water, like bubbly, buble, whatever you want to call it, like it's crazy the volume that brand's doing, right? And that's
Yeah.
all these seltzers are, is a can of buble with a friggin' shot of booze. That's all it is.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
definitely
And
appealing to the. Go
yeah,
on, man.
like appealing for sure, and certainly expensive, but also complicated. Our friend Matt from Rorschach, well, like when I was talking to him about this a couple of years ago, was telling us that the Free Spirit non-alcoholic IPA that they make, that like he said is the hardest recipe that they've ever had to develop. Just to kind of get that right, because it's you know like you were just describing, that simple matter of making a beer and spinning the alcohol out of it is not obviously not as simple as it sounds, to be able to still have the integrity of that flavor.
Keep the flavors, the aromas. It's very
The
very
dry
different. Things
hops.
have changed recently. There's more techniques and yeast and stuff that are helped, but it's still costly to make. Right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So we have one more beer to do, and then we can do a little bit
Yes.
more talking. I'm thinking
Yeah, man. Let's do it.
this is another classic. We brought it back.
I have not
This
had
is,
this beer for a
if I'm
long
not
time.
mistaken, is one of the ones that used to be in the great big 650 or
Would have
750
started
mil
in a
bottles back in the
750
day, right?
ml bottle. Yep, you got it, man.
Oof.
I remember
Classic
that.
6%. Oh yeah, I remember this in the. Did you ever have it? I swear you had it in the short, like the almost twist top bottles.
We had this in 750 mil, twist off, 473 mil. It's been
Everything
around the world.
around the block. I don't even know
And
if I've
the,
had
the
this
notes
since.
of coffee and caramel, crazy. You want to
I
hear
love
a
that.
good one? You want to make yourself a little dessert one night?
Talk
Grab a
to me.
can of maple porter and pour it over a nice big scoop of vanilla ice cream. You're going to get a frappuccino, baby.
Oh, let's
Oh yeah.
go. I'm here for
Oh
that.
yeah.
Oof. So you actually put maple in this bad boy?
Oh, there's drums.
Drums of maple.
The
That's
mine's
what I was-
warmed up a bit because if it's too cold, you're not going to get it.
Right.
You want to drink this beer in all honesty. Like mine's pretty much cellar temperature because we know we've been talking for 2 hours.
You would be
So
going hard.
it was ice cold. So big difference. So I've had this beer ice cold at the tap room
Mm-hmm.
and it tastes good. Nothing wrong with it. But this beer, to really, really enjoy it and get all the flavors in it. I don't know if you guys just pulled yours out.
We have coolers.
This has been
Yeah,
sitting on my kitchen
just out of the
table.
cooler bag here.
The caramel and the coffee and the chocolate and the meat, it actually tastes sweeter than it is cold. So it's amazing, oddly enough, that when it's cold, it doesn't taste that sweet. It tastes dry. I've not had this at this temperature as of yet, and this is a beautiful beer.
Gentlemen, get that in you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Again, like someone that wanted to start drinking
Ooh, yeah.
Kentucky.
Oof.
It would be they would
good
never
intro.
do it, but this again, call it again. But it's what a porter is. Porter's in the
Sweet.
stout family, right? But someone to start drinking an imperial stout or like something like Kentucky, they never be able to handle it. But this again is gateway. Like this beer is more deceiving. Its color and smell. When you start drinking it, it's well balanced. It's smooth. It's approachable. Like my mouth is just full of that coffee, nut, and chocolate. Just like it's just lingering in my mouth. It's beautiful, beautiful.
It's like a nice that maple sweetness as well. I mean, maybe in comparison, because I'm having it directly from a
There's
more
thousands
bitter
of
beer.
dollars. We do like 35 barrel batch of this stuff, and we put thousands of dollars of maple syrup, Ontario maple syrup, in
Directly.
this batch. Like I said,
man,
I'm not kidding.
it's glorious.
It's in our mix pack right now. We have a mix pack with 5 beers and a toque, which is a great Christmas buy and gift.
Truly.
But if you got it, Pontiac,
There he is.
and get that maple porter, pour it over some. So we did a food and drink show. We used to do the Green Apple Pilsner, and I don't know if you've ever been to a festival, but Toronto Beer Fest, many, many years ago, we have a lineup that's like 30, 40 deep on a Saturday afternoon, and we're doing Green Apple Pilsner floats. Scoop of vanilla ice cream in a 16 mil plastic glass, filled it up with beer, gave them a spoon, and it was on fire. We had this lineup, and I'll never forget this. Our booth is on fire. People are lining up for it, getting beer, getting the float, or getting both. And I see these media people, and they're like, what the hell? Who's this brewery? Well, who's Nickel Brook? Like, we were nobody, right? And I look over at the badges, and I kind of walked up to them, hey, guys, how's it going? I noticed they're with the Toronto Star. I'm like, holy Batman. So I'm like, hey, guys, you want to try our float? So I handed, a couple of them one of the floats, and they were like, holy mackerel, can you give us a quick interview and we take some pictures? Do we not make, this was, I think, I don't know if it was Friday or I think it was the Friday night. And then Saturday, do we not make the front page of the entertainment section of the Toronto Star? Nickel Brook rocks Toronto Festival of Beers.
Look at that.
There you go.
So we would then, that was one of the first shows we did that. And then we'd start doing Toronto, because then the fall sets in, and there's Toronto food and drink, and Ottawa food and drink, and London food and drink, and Hamilton food and drink. And we would have our beers, and we would do Green Apple Pilsner floats. And we were doing the Toronto Food Festival, and a chef came up to us and tried the beer, and he saw us doing it with the Green Apple. And he goes, have you guys tried the maple porter with ice cream? And we're like, no, but we can. And of course, we get a glass, do it, and we're like, oh my God. It turns, because of the coffee and the chocolate and the caramel.
Yeah.
Honestly, I let the ice cream melt a bit, and it turns into a Frappuccino. So if I'm having a dinner party and everybody's into it, my dessert will be maple porter with a scoop of vanilla ice cream.
I'm going to have to do that.
And this
That
is really
sounds
good beer to
fantastic.
cook with, right? Like you can marinate ribs with this beer and stuff. Like it's a good base to, those stews and marinades. This is a great base.
Yeah, pulled
Yep.
pork or something like that. We used to
For
do
those,
that.
Oh
for those
yeah.
beers.
Yeah, pour a can. That's perfect. Yeah, man, this is a classic. This is so nice. Porters are underrated, man. I really think porters are
Yeah.
just such a phenomenal style, and they're just this is really cool because this is just such a unique version of it. And typically maple, the interesting thing here, I always know that maple like can kind of ferment out of beers when you throw a lot of maple in there. So I imagine there has, like you said, like a metric shit ton of maple in this for it to
What we
come
do
through.
with this beer is we brew the beer and we put them, so we don't actually boil the beer into the maple syrup into the beer. So we actually add the maple syrup,
Like in the bright.
at the whirlpool. So you make beer, you boil it out,
Oh,
you put in the whirlpool to separate the solids, the hops, and everything from the liquid. And then once that's done, we add the maple syrup. So we put this beer into the whirlpool, and that's why you get a little bit of residual sugar. By boiling it, you
gotcha.
would break it down a bit and reduce it a bit. So that's why you get a little bit more residual sugar in this beer.
That makes sense, but it's not too much. I wasn't even saying that. It's just it's such
No.
a unique characteristic. It's like it was sharply
Yeah.
sweet compared to a very bitter West Coast IPA, but it's so smooth and balanced. Like this is the perfect, like I love ending like a drinking session. You have a like a lager, you have like a whatever West Coast IPA, hazy IPA, and then finish on like a sour or a dark beer. And this is perfect because it's such a dessert style beer without being over the top and not too sweet. And I can imagine a nice. I don't really do lactose, dairy, but I would do a nice like a coconut base or oat based ice cream in this. That would be money. I can see that working.
So you guys had, I think you guys wanted to have shoot a couple of questions at me.
Yeah, man. So we're off in the beginning. We were talking about sort of the state of craft beer, and obviously that's a big thing that everybody's talking about. Obviously, last week was the Ontario Craft Brewers Conference that we were all at, and it was just something that I feel like whenever I sort of sit down with somebody from the beer scene, we just end up inherently talking about this. It's just such a an interesting thing. So before we were started, you were making some really good points, kind of about just where it's at, and the difficulties that breweries are facing right now, like uniquely. Like I'd love if you like maybe just riff off that a little bit and like sort of where do
Yeah,
you think Ontario craft
it's
beer is at
crazy
right now?
time. So the first year of COVID, I worked like an 8 hour day. I don't even know what that looks like. My average day was 9 to 16 hours, right? You thought you had to be at the brewery every day. You were making beer, delivering it, tasting, sales calls, emails. COVID hits, your meetings are on Zoom. So going to LCBO for a meeting was a day to get there, meeting, get back. Now you're 45 minute Zoom call, you're done. So you get all your work done, you're enjoying your life more. I started cycling, gardening more, expanded my garden. Things are great. Sales are flat. Costs are down because you're not doing the shows. There's no coasters, glassware, posters, tap handles, all that's gone. So bottom line's strong, top line's flat, but you can live with that. And then second year COVID hits, it's like, oh my God, I drank so much last year. I've gained 10 pounds, this and that. And then, people, look at marijuana. It's like, well, I can, enjoy some cannabis products and not gain weight. And then they look at these seltzers and go, oh my God, this has hardly any carbs and calories and no sugar. And all of a sudden it pivots. Then on top of that, let's face it, you know, I'm in my mid 50s. I grew up watching Hockey Night in Canada, and I would watch a game, and then go outside and play hockey, pretend I was Daryl Sittler, and when I turned 19, I bought a case of Molson Canadian because I was brainwashed watching Hockey Night in Canada, and that was the beer sponsor, right? And fast forward to 2023, a kid turns 19. He's not buying that beer. He's not even buying craft beer. He's going to the cannabis shop, buying something there. Edibles are on fire. Smoking marijuana has got more and more popular, and they're worried about how they look, and they're worried about their sugar intake and their carb intake. And all of a sudden, these seltzers are appealing, and they're much more approachable. Did I love beer when I was 19? Yeah, a little bit, but it wasn't my favorite drink. I bought it because I wanted to catch a buzz, right? And let's face
Yep.
it, if you're drinking those, it's flavored water, basically, right? So all of a sudden, the younger demographics has pivoted to that. The older demographics is saying, I beer bloats me, and I gain too much weight drinking it. Your metabolism slows down, so you got multiple things happening. Beer was on fire when beer went in the grocery. Grocery had Christmas for 12 months. I talked to buyers at all the top grocers in the province. And the first year because the restaurants were closed, people were cooking and entertaining at home. They were drinking, all their different favorite drinks and cocktails and stuff. And they were on fire. And then now, you're in recession, everything's gone up. Cost of food, dairy, bread has skyrocketed. People are doing their groceries and they're like going, okay, they get to the beer aisle and they're like, I'm out of cash. And then the grocery stores that sell more beer or have a more diverse lineup are the Loblawses and the Fortinos and the Metros. And people aren't shopping there as much. Instead of going to Loblaws, they're going to No Frills. Instead of going to Metro, they're going to Food Basic. Instead of going to Sobeys, they're going to Freshco, and they don't have as much beer, and a lot of them don't even have beer, and so we're not getting that exposure. And then they get to check out and they go, I don't have any money left for beer, so I'm not going to the liquor store or beer store to get it. And if they do see it in the grocery store, they kind of get a mental total of what their shopping cart's at, and they skip that aisle now, right? So many
Yeah,
things are
when your
happening.
grocery bill is already when your grocery bill is already topping 200 plus, you're definitely not thinking like, oh, let's peruse the craft beer aisle while we're at it.
Mm.
Almost everything I regularly buy has gone up about $1. Like, you don't see kale for $2 or $3. Kale is $4, right? Your bread's gone up $1, your dairy's gone up. Like, butter has gone up a couple of dollars.
Insane,
Milk has
almost
gone,
double. The ones I get,
bacon.
yeah.
We used to get
Bacon,
bacon
yeah.
on sale all the time for like $3-4. A pound of bacon is $7-8 now, right? You look at potato chips. You used to get a bag of potato chips for $2 all day long. They're $4, and the bag sizes dropped. I was looking at it the other day,
Yep.
and I was doing the math, and we complain about the price of beer and the price of gas, but we pay for soft drinks, water, and chips. Do the math. Like, some of these chips, we're paying $6, $8, $10 a pound for chips,
Yeah. You could
right?
probably just make your
Bottled
own.
water, like
Yeah.
some of these boutique geeky waters, what we're paying for a bottle of water. And then you got this flavored water, what we're paying for, it, like, say, by the liter. And then we complain about the price of beer and the price of gas. But we'll buy flavored water. And then, to make it even worse, beginning of 2023, for about a month, the news had alcohol's not good for you. Alcohol, 2 drinks a
Remember.
week. But, excuse my language, we allow us to eat hot dogs. I've been told hot dogs should have a warning label on them. They're so bad for you, but we don't worry about that. My dad lived to be 91 years old, and he had 2 glasses of wine every day with his meal. We had a bottle of wine on our dinner table every night. As a kid, I was allowed a glass, and my dad had about two. And if you looked at his medical record, he barely had one, right? It's all in moderation, all in proportion. It's how you live your life, right? And all the other things you do. But they brainwashed us to think that alcohol is not good for you. Yeah, if you abuse it, it is, but in moderation, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yep. The truth
All
is in the
these
middle.
factors compiling, government's telling you not to drink, the news telling you the same thing, everything's gone up in price. everybody's counting their carbs and their sugars and their calories, and then on top of all that, everything's gone up to us as a brewer. Like, 2 years ago, you couldn't get cardboard. Like, people didn't realize, by ordering online and going, everybody, we were one of them. Like, every day there was the doorbell rang with the Amazon box, right? And I said to my wife, I go, if I see another Amazon box, I'm gonna lose my mind, because I can't get cardboard boxes right now, because people didn't
Yeah.
realize there's only so much cardboard. There's only so much of it being produced. And people like Amazon and Walmarts and stuff, they've got contracts with penalties. I have contracts, but I'm not smart enough to put a penalty on it. So, I put in my cardboard order for my can tray boxes, and like, sorry, we can't fill that order. What do you mean you can't fill that order? I've been buying boxes from you from Better Bitters days. I've been a loyal customer for 30 years. Sorry, John, we don't have any board. What do you mean you don't have any board? You're in the cardboard business. And then, you finally find out that, people like Amazon secured all the board in the country. And now you got to find someone that's got board, and the price is triple, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Cans went up 25%. A can lid went up 30%. A glass went up 40%. Barley went up 50%. People don't realize, yeah, we have the prairies and we grow a lot of barley, but it's not enough. A lot of our barley comes from the Ukraine, and that's why our bread prices are high, and all our beer prices have had to go up. That country's in devastation, right? Like, they got bombs flying around. They're not cultivating their fields, right? So a lot of things happened in a very short period of time, and it's put our industry in. And on top of all that, the industry grew too fast, right? Like, it got so sexy that, everybody wanted to own a brewery or be part of a brewery. And, who doesn't have a friend that's got some money and likes beer and will be your investor? And places like Niagara College and stuff, like, they're pumping out all these kids, and there's not enough jobs, and all of a sudden they're all starting these breweries and stuff. And so it's a combination. Like, everything happened, like, honest to God, within 12, 24 months, you had so many breweries opening. You had a reduction in people in consumption, increase in all your costs. That there's nothing I touch that's not gone up in price on me, and and everybody, and we're a solid staple brewery. We have a good base, right? So a lot of these little guys, I don't know how they're going to do it. Tap room alone, unless you run a very lean and mean shop, a tap room alone, I don't think can cut it. Like, if you're a brew pub and you sell a lot of food and you've got good quality food and you got a good price point, and I honestly think 2024, especially the first quarter, are going to be interesting times for brewers, because when people get their visa bill, they're going to be partying, having fun, and drinking and eating, till January 1st, and then reality is going to set in when they realized how much they spent and costs and different things. So I think we're in for a challenging 2024, and every week I hear of a brewery closing right now, and it's sad. I don't like that. That's devastation for anybody. Anybody that has to do Chapter 11, that's tough on any human being, and
It's heartbreaking.
people that work within that industry or for that company. It's tough. It's going to be interesting. So we need to really push, and there's a big push right now to go to your MPs and MPPs, and OCB is, I can send it to you, but they've created a postcard that shows, all the costs a brewery has. And when you have a can of beer for $3.50 and you take out the costs of producing the beer, overhead, packaging materials, grains, labor, tax, you're down to zero. And the only hay you've got right now is our tap rooms, because our tap rooms, we get all the money from that beer sale. So if you can make a few points there, but depending where you are in your business, a tap room may not be enough, right? So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the next 12 to 18 months. So we need to support those craft breweries and those little guys.
I couldn't agree more as far as supporting
Preach.
any small business, I mean, beer particularly, because that's what we're talking about here, but any small business in your community, instead of going to Starbucks, go to a small local cafe,
Yep,
independent
I do
cafe,
that.
all the time. I
I
would,
dine in the small mama papa shops that
there you
like
go.
I would rather buy my clothes and stuff from a little independent, store. I'm a big supporter of small business, huge supporter
Love
of
that.
small business.
I'd love to see that, and I think we all need to do that more. What do you think is going to get craft beer out of this, whether it's in 2024 or beyond?
It's a cycle. Like, a lot of these seltzers are not well made, and you know what? Like, I got my exercise playing road hockey, climbing trees, biking. People need to get more active, get off their butts. Like, they're worried about their calorie consumption. Be active. Exercise. Go for a run. Go for
Burn
a
those
walk. Go for a
calories.
bike ride. And and
Exactly.
and pay attention to what you're eating and drinking. Those are all artificial flavored, and hopefully they'll grow out of, when I try a lot of these seltzers, I can't even finish the can because all I taste is the sweetener and the artificial flavors in it, right? So hopefully people will
No,
grow out of it, and it'll be a bit of a roller coaster, and the strong will be left standing, basically, right? Do you
that's
think we have
a
time for one more? What time?
we good. Do you want? What do you want to do? You want to do that root beer?
Well, we want to talk about root beer.
I
Nickel
think we
Brook's
should
named
talk about
after
the
the
root beer.
kid.
Let's talk
I
about
So
root beer.
my last story of the night.
yes.
I don't know if everybody's been to Ellicottville, but they've got a great little brewery there, EBC, Ellicottville Brewing Company. And kids, of course, wanted them to learn how to ski. I didn't even learn how to ski till I was in my early 30s. I'm bringing Nick and Brooke to Glen Eden and Milton, learning how to ski. I'm watching them ski, and I don't know how, so I signed up for adult ski lessons, and I learned to ski within a season. The next season, we book a family trip to Ellicottville. We're out having dinner, and Brookie is a little bit of mini me, and she sits down, and I order a flight of beers, and my daughter orders a root beer. She gets the root beer, she starts to sip on it, and being the dramatic little girl that she is, she's like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, oh my God, this root beer is going to change my life." I'm like, "Okay, Brooke, calm down. I don't think a root beer is going to change your life." So she drinks it, she passes it to me, I taste it. I was like, "Wow, this is really good." We're leaving the brewery. We've had our dinner. We're cashed out. We're leaving. And there is a pallet. Excuse
Oh,
me.
bless you, sir.
There's a pallet drop of root beer by the by the door. Anyway, so there's a pallet of beer by the root beer by the door. And my daughter looks and goes, "Dad, can you buy us a case of root beer?" I'm like, "Sure, honey." So I grabbed the case of root beer, put it on the counter. Girl comes over and goes, "That'll be $30." And I went, "Pardon me." The exchange
Yeah.
then was like upper 30s. Okay. I'm like, "Brooke, this case of pop is going to cost Dad $40. I'm not doing it." "Dad, please." And my son, "Come on, Dad." And then the girl at the counter goes, "Sir, this isn't a pop. This is a craft soda." So I break down.
Ooh.
I buy the case. We're heading home. I'm beating myself up. You work hard for your money, and you want you just
Absolutely.
you want to be good with it, right? So I'm driving home. I'm beating myself up that I bought this case of pop for $40, but the craft soda really light bulb,
Resonated.
right?
Yeah.
So I get home, kids to bed, unload the truck, flip open my computer. I Google craft soda. I Google root beer. Dr. Hires comes up, 1867 root tea. There's the recipe. Start reading the story. It was an herbal drink made by a doctor. Couldn't give it away. Fermented it, called it root beer, and it became one of the biggest selling sodas in the world. There's the process and the recipe. And I'm reading the process going, "Oh my God, you make a tea, you ferment it, you bottle it. You basically need a brewery's equipment to make this thing." So it became a pop because why would they want to make it that way? But the true recipe was a fermented tea. So I decided to make it a project every Sunday afternoon. Nick and Brooke and I would go down to the brewery, and on our pilot system, we would try to make root beer. And first batch, it was basically colored water. Second batch, colored water, a little bit of flavor. Third batch, my daughter's like, "Hey, Dad, I'm not having fun anymore because you're making a tea. We're doing this all in one day." It's like, "Daddy, do you know what you're doing? I'm not. I don't. This isn't fun." So we leave. I call one of my wife's friends that's a herbalist, and I said, "Tanaz, you need to help me find," because I was just buying this stuff at the bulk store.
Mm.
So we went shopping at herbal shops, East Indian herbal shops and Chinese herbal shops and Scarborough, Mississauga. Half of them didn't even, they wanted cash. Like, it was crazy. I'm running around buying the stuff. I'm buying cases of anise, cases of cinnamon, vanilla beans. I redo the recipe, making it with all this stuff. And it was like, wow, wow, it's turning out. So home run, turned out great. It's not, your Hires root beer, and it's not really geared to kids. It's more of an adult root beer. And then we couldn't come up with a name. I'm beating myself. What am I going to call it? And my daughter talks more than I do. My wife and I are in the front seat. We're going somewhere, and Brooke comes up between us and starts talking. And we'd been making the root beer like every weekend. She's like, "Blah, blah, blah," talking to us, and I'm just looking at my wife, and I'm like, "Honey, I just thought of the name of the root beer. What? Babylon Brooks." And
Hey.
that was the name.
That's
There you go.
amazing. I'm gonna go grab mine. You guys keep talking. I'm just gonna grab mine. Keep going.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So then we're making this root beer. Brooke's happy. My son feels neglected. And, Nick started having, parties. And of course, these kids, of course he wasn't 19, and, under your own roof, these kids are going to drink with, under your supervision. And if you don't allow them to, they're going to hide it from you. Right. So at a young
Yep.
age, in an early stage in, Nick's life, he was allowed to drink beer, right? But he had to be in the home. I had to be home, and he was supervised by myself, right? So, there was some interesting parties at our house and interesting evenings, and we decided to do a ginger beer, and we called it Naughty Nick's Ginger Beer. So we make ginger beer and root beer, and the ginger beer is more of a Jamaican ginger, and they're great. Like, people make dark and stormies, Moscow mules. They're great cocktail. Even this root beer with a spiced rum is excellent on some
Oh
ice.
yeah, I could
And
see
our
that.
ginger beer, like even Ryan Gingers, if you make a Ryan Ginger with my ginger beer, you will never buy plain ginger ale again. But it's tough. It's a
Yeah,
tough market too.
you're not gonna be reaching for a Schweppes in that case.
No, and we thought that would be a gateway to get into accounts and stuff. But the pop manufacturers are just as bad as the big breweries, right? The kickbacks and the deals they create and all the stuff that they do. It's a racket as well, the pop industry. Huge racket.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
This
it's been good for us. It's in a couple of natural food stores. It's in Jack Astor's. It's been in Kelsey's, and even if you can't get into an account, I tell the staff, like, the root beer and the ginger beer is a great door opener for licensees for on premise, right?
yeah.
Sell them a case of root beer. It's a great product. They'll get great reviews. And then eventually maybe you can sell them, a case of beer or a keg of beer, right? So it's a great talking piece. It's great to leave samples on and stuff, right? So it's been a great gatekeeper for us. That's it,
No,
baby.
that's dope.
So the old label used to have a caricature of Nick and Brooke on a raft
I remember.
going down a stream. And it was funny, when they were kids, they thought it was cool and fun. And then when they became older teenagers, they came up to me and said, "Dad, Can you redo the label? Because they were embarrassed of seeing themselves on the label. The original label was a caricature of them on a raft going down a stream.
Super cute. But I understand as you get older, it's not going to be
Yeah.
a total fit.
But it's got a lot
It's
of. We buy boxes of anise, boxes of cinnamon, to make this product.
It's super cool, man. The even
You
just
can taste it too. Like the spices really come out a lot more than than in like a conventional root beer. Like if you're just grabbing a can
oh
of like
yeah,
A&W
Yeah,
or Barks or whatnot,
craft.
there's definitely a lot more heat from like the cinnamon, and you mentioned vanilla as well. Like there's
yeah.
definitely
We
got
buy
some smoothness and
boxes and
some
boxes
sweetness
of
from that.
cinnamon.
It's yeah.
Anise too is a big player. We buy boxes of anise, and we soak this stuff for hours in hot water. Like we make the tea.
It's so
Yep.
delicious, man. I love this so much. The other, I mean, I don't know if you spoke about it just while I was gone there, but you also do the ginger beer as well.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Talked about that, yeah.
Naughty
So,
Nick's ginger beer.
pardon,
Naughty Nick. So
Naughty
the
Nicks.
beer is called Babylon Brooks, and we were saying Nick started having keg parties at a very young age, and there was a few fun times, and the boys were getting themselves into trouble, so we called it Naughty Nick's. But the ginger beer is more of a Jamaican, got a bit of heat, and this is definitely flavor. There's kids that don't like it, and there's kids that love it, but it's definitely more of a mature audience's soda, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's spectacular to me. I don't really drink soda at all, but I like the. It's like it's got so much flavor without being overly sweet. Like it sort of sits just nice. And
Well,
it,
the
and it
main sugar we use on this is Demerara, and
mm,
people don't realize that's a very corrupt world as well. Doing my research and getting samples and stuff, I found out that most Demerara is white sugar that molasses has been poured onto. So if you get Demerara and
Mm.
it's gummy and gooey, it's white sugar that's got molasses poured in it. If you buy Demerara, it's usually a larger grain and it's a light brown, and that's it. So we buy organic Demerara to make our sodas.
that's amazing. It's just how does this sell both the root beer and the ginger beer? How does that
Out
sell
of our
overall?
tap rooms does amazing. We have a couple of natural food stores that are selling it. Does well. Jack Astor's carries it.
Oh
So
yeah,
oddly enough, because of what's happening in the beer industry, the past few weeks, I've been putting out feelers with Nature's Emporium and
should
all
like
the
a
other
Healthy
natural
Planet or
food
something.
stores. Yeah, the health conscious stores and health conscious distributors. I've been approaching them.
Amazing. That's smart, man. It's something we've talked about before, but like there's a bunch of breweries who have little side projects, whether it's non-alcoholic beer or just fizzy flavored water. Um, it seems to be a bit of like a nice little buffer for the bottom line there, just to keep
An
things
add-on,
going.
right? It's
Yeah, man.
it's that was like an appetizer with your meal, right? Well, we launched our first cocktail. I didn't want to get in the seltzers game. Kids are lazy. People have less time on their hands. So we launched a Paloma this summer, and we're not calling it a seltzer. We want to play in that game. It's what we call a bar quality cocktail. It's made with uh, tequila. We use a guave base, but grapefruit juice, blood orange, lime. So to make that drink, you'd have to get four fresh juices, soda, and tequila. That gets difficult at home, right?
Yeah,
So we
pricey too.
called the board. We called the board back over a year ago, well, not this past summer, the summer before, and talked to the director there and asked what should we do. A lot of people are doing seltzers. Do you think we should get into it? Has that ship sailed? And they said, John, it's very aggressive, very competitive. And like you're saying, like it used to be just a single packs. They're buying 12s and 2 4s of this stuff now. So when someone buys one of these 2 4 seltzers, they're good for a week or two, right? So we decided to create a bar quality cocktail. LCBO got because they have calls on on what they on the computer. They looking for cocktails, and they got over 100 applications. They sampled about 30 of them, picked and sampled 30, and then they picked about 10, and we were one of the 10 chosen cocktails for 2023.
Hell yeah.
And our Paloma ranked number 2 in the new cocktail division.
That's awesome.
God damn.
So it's gotten approved for 2024, but it's a racket. Cocktails or spirits, cider, and wine are taxed at 53% in this province of ours. So when you knock off 53% plus the government fees, you're not left with a lot. So it is a tough market to crack. It's a huge volume game. Yeah.
53% is obscene.
Yeah.
It's
Where
so
craft
crazy.
is taxed more at like 25. The big guys are taxed at 50.
Still, I mean, it's just so much money. It's so
Yeah.
much. But
and when
I
you
mean,
do
great
that,
for
and
you
that's
guys.
just provincial. When you do federal and provincial, we're about a third taxes. When you get a can of beer, about a third of it went to the different government bodies.
Right. And
Crazy times, man.
It really is. It's wild times here. But look, man, you've really got you've built something phenomenal over the last couple of decades. You've been able to diversify it and create, just some gateway products that bring people into beer that also, completely satisfy people who are already into beer, and then, do things like the root beer, the ginger beer, the Paloma, and things like that are a little outside the norm, and just sort of keep the brand alive. And I don't know, man. I highly respect you and everything that you guys have achieved.
Thank
I think
you.
it's just really important to Ontario, man. And I appreciate you hanging out with us. I know you have a super early morning tomorrow, so we're going to
Yes, got to keep brewing. Got to keep those kettles rocking.
You don't mess around.
Yes.
Johnny, let's take a
all
quick...
the while with
No,
with everything else that you've done that Cee has just mentioned, you've also managed to make one of the most accessible West Coast IPAs in Ontario, one of our personal faves.
Absolutely.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
John, what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick thumbnail, take a quick screenshot. Do you want to hold up a couple of the cans or bottles and everything there?
Let's get headstock.
That's what I was going to do too. A little maple porter here. Oh, Nate's got the
and Naughty Neighbor.
Look at that. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Glorious. John, where can everybody find Nickel Brook online and in real life?
Well, it's in most of your LCBOs, most of your grocery stores, and most of your beer stores. And of course, we can shop online. And honest, our best salesperson in this province is you, the consumer. If you want one of our products bad enough, email us, tell us what store you visit, but go in and talk to the store manager, talk to the beer ambassador. Don't talk to the cutest person in the store. Talk to someone with some authority. Ask them to bring our product in, because I go in, our staff go in, we're just another pain in the butt salesperson. You go in, you're a customer, you're spending money in that store, they will listen to you. They will listen to you more than they'll listen to me. If you're a bar owner and every day 10 people come in and ask for headstock, what do you think that bar owner is going to do?
That's a great point.
Right? And it's tough to get taps, right? So if you want our beer in your local restaurant and bar, push. Ask your friends to push. You want our beer in your local beer store, liquor store, talk to the manager and push. You will get a space quicker than we will. The market is saturated. It's tough right now. And you, the consumer, have the power to change that. And that's what happened to craft too, going back to, the beginning. My demographics, my parents, my grandparents, they were stuck. The options weren't there. And they generally drank. My dad, most of his, until I started the brewery, but until I started the brewery, I saw maybe 2, 3 different brands come through our house in a period of decades, right? Where what was happening now, kids were coming home with craft beer because they wanted to know. 20 years ago, it's like, where'd you get the grain? Where'd you get the hops? What water are you using? Any artificial flavors or preservatives? They cared about that. Now, 20 years later, they're worried about their sugar carb intake, right? But 20 years ago, it was drinking and eating something more natural, more health conscious, right? And now, kids were coming into the brewery, grabbing Headstock, Naughty, Wicked, taking it home. The dad's drinking the same old beer he's been drinking for 30 years. He sees his son drinking it. He's bugging him, try this, dad, try this, dad. All of a sudden, they slowly have converted a lot of them, right? But it took years. So we've seen a little bit of an older demographics come in. And then, our Headstock drinkers, they're getting older. And so we got to rejuvenate that younger demographics to start drinking good quality alcohol beverages, not that artificially flavored stuff.
Couldn't agree more. And that's
There we go.
that's on all of us. Johnny, we're just going to quickly wrap up. Stick around. We'll just say goodbye off air. But honestly, man, thank you so much for your time. It's at Nickel Brook Brewing on social, and nickelbrook.com if you want to go and order any products that will deliver to you anywhere in the province. Of course,
we have a brewery in Etobicoke on the Queensway, and then our tap room and brew pub in Burlington. Please visit.
Come by. I definitely have to swing by, and I'm gonna try that goddamn pierogi. That sounds insane. I'll let you know for sure, man, because I'm around the corner, super close. Everybody, thank you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, and hit that notification bell, Nathaniel.
Ding.
So you know when the new drops. Follow us everywhere at BAOS Podcast. Chuck us a 5-star rating on the Spotify, Apple Podcast. You know the vibes. We drop every Wednesday. Guys, go check out Nickel Brook, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.
Cheers.